Okay, so welcome everyone. This is another two-part session for higher self-hypnosis. I have the lovely Nita here, and she has agreed to allow her intake session and her hypnosis session to be placed on YouTube because she watched so many of the other sessions. And were they beneficial when you watched them?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It really helped me to see what it was essentially that I was getting myself into, and it made me really excited and inspired to go through with it. Yeah.
Yay. Yeah, and I have a lot of people who email me and say, please tell your clients. Then also I'll tell you in advance. They say, please tell your clients thank you so much because those sessions are so helpful. And there seems like something in every single session that you can grab, right? That people can glom onto, so to speak. So yeah, I have a couple more coming out on YouTube, but this one will join them. Yay. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to be looking forward again to this computer while I take notes as you tell me all about your life. And then you have sent me in advance a long list of questions that you want me to ask your higher self. So I'll just tell you, like I tell everyone else, that depending on how quickly your higher self talks, if your higher self is pretty chatty and just blah, 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 spits out the answers, we'll be able to get to all these questions.
I'm pretty chatty, so my higher self is me. She's gonna be
Right,
all day.
right.
So hopefully it
Right, right,
resonates.
right. It's just some people, I don't know, I think it's the mental process of trying to you get the answers and then you're just trying to like filter them through and get them through and they're just like the words come really slow. So hopefully you're not like that, but if you're, talking in a regular pace or a fast pace, we'll be able to get through all these questions. So no problem. Um, so I'm going to go to my intake notes. And you already told me before we went on the recording where you live and how old you are, so we don't need to put that on the recording. But oh, I forgot to tell you before we came on the recording. If there's anything that's super, super, super private that you don't want on social media, just ask me to pause the recording and I will do that because it's easier for me than trying to figure out how to edit it out. So I'll just pause the recording for that and then we'll start it back up again. So just if there's anything like that. So no problem.
Okay.
All right.
I mean, this is about healing. There's obviously a lot of trauma. It's gonna go out
Yeah.
there. It's
Yeah.
fine.
And everyone's got trauma. Everyone's trauma just has a different flavor and color, right?
Yep.
So and the thing I love about
Spicy.
yeah, well the thing I love about putting these sessions out there and different books like Robert Schwartz's book Your Soul's Plan, where he there's a number of lives where this person talks about all the trauma they've had, and then they put the person under hypnosis and find out why they plan to have these things experience in their life. Um, is I love these stories because I mean, sometimes people feel like when they have trauma that they're different than everyone else and that they're all alone, and they're not. Like, we all have trauma and it's just getting through. It's like just getting through it and healing it. And it's awesome to see other people and hear stories of other people healing their trauma and making it through and coming out the other side because I think it inspires us and gives us hope. Like, well, gosh, if they can do it, I can do it, right? Right. So, okay. So, why don't you go ahead? And this may be short. I'm not sure because fairly short because you're pretty young. So, you haven't had like a huge life, but depending on everything that's happened, maybe there's just a lot of twists and turns. So, we'll have to see how this goes. So, go ahead and some people find it easier to start when they're younger and then just kind of tell me about your family a little bit, relationships you had like with brothers and sisters or special grandparents or anybody who really impacted your life, and then what the relationship is like today. I like to know that too. And then
Okay.
I can know which direction to take the questions once you're under hypnosis. Okay?
Okay. All right. Like I said, life is a little odd for me. I was
Okay.
born in North Carolina, New Jersey, so
Okay.
that should point you in the direction of where my story is gonna go.
Okay.
But so North Bergen, New Jersey, stormy day, or stormy night, I should say, was born. Um, my parents actually had a very strange dynamic. My father is 30 years older than my mother, and the time that he met my mother, she was, I believe, 19 years old. Um, So there was a drastic age difference, and that sort of scenario kind of made my mother the pariah of the family. Um, After I was born, 2 years passed. We moved from North Bergen to Florida, where we didn't really get to know any other family member, aside from my father's mother, Bella, who I honestly believe started my sugar addiction. But like a wonderful grandmother, she would always, bake wonderful sweets and everything. Um, for myself and my two younger siblings.
Okay.
We'll say C and L.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
So you have a brother and a sister or sisters or?
I have two younger siblings, a younger brother and a younger sister,
So a
and then
young brother. Okay.
I have three older siblings, which are half siblings. We'll call them M.
Well, that's okay. We don't have to call them by any initials. Just are they boys or girls? The older ones?
One older sister, significantly older than me. She's older than my mother, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, when I say there was an age, I meant it. My father is older than my mother's father. It's a huge difference.
And then the half brothers, you have two half brothers.
Yes, and then I have two.
And they got to be quite a bit older than you too, then.
Yes, yes, they are.
Almost like uncles, right?
So my sister, my older sister, was actually my godmother. I was baptized Catholic. Excuse me. And wonderful. She's an absolute wonderful person. I have dragon's blood incense burning right now, and it reminds me of her. And this like calm, like energy. Like she loves everything like Chinese. Like everything is Oriental in her house. Like all these decorations, and I remember that growing up, just being like a huge influence. Is the only time we ever really like went out. Like she was part of the only family that we really knew. I knew my siblings.
Oh, okay.
I knew my father's mother, and then I knew my mother's mother until I was about 5 years old. I got to meet what would be my favorite aunt for a while, which was my mother's younger sister. That was important, and we're gonna call her Aunt V.
Okay. 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 Let's stay straight on track for one because we're jumping around a lot and my notes are going to get all mixed up. So, okay. So we got the older half sister. You said she was one of the only family members you really knew, but then you started naming all these other family members. So
No,
was she?
that was the only family we really had until because I'm Latina, we have like hundreds of
Okay.
there's hundreds of us. So that was all we really knew until I was about 9 years old. I didn't see anyone except for my older sister, like my her siblings, and my father's mother, and that was it. The only people I had ever seen in my life.
Okay, got it. Okay, so you were living in Florida, and then okay, so how did mom and dad get along though?
Mom and dad did not get along very well. My father would disappear from time to time. He had done some work, which was always so mysterious. At some point, he was working on, like a farm. A different time, he was working as a mechanic, and it was always you never really knew what he was doing. And if you ask him now, like there's like a couple of underhanded, shady things that I guess like he was doing back then. But my mom was mostly the one constantly having a job. She worked as a manager at Rack Room Shoes. That's how she got us, clothes. She worked very, very hard. And unfortunately, that ended up taking a toll later on for her. But they mostly they fought. They did not get along. I would definitely say my father was a more manipulative figure in that situation. And my mother already having come from a very toxic family environment, it just sort of weighed on her so heavily that I believe she at some point collapsed under all of the pressure.
Okay, so is dad still around today?
Yep, I know,
Okay.
very old. He is still around today, yes.
Okay. So are they still married?
No, they actually divorced, then they got remarried, and now they're technically separate, but they haven't spoken in probably like over 10 years. Yeah.
Okay, spoken in over 10 years. What's relationship like now with dad?
Um, Honestly, I kind of just sort of ended it. He has this sort of mentality of repeating certain memories, certain cycles, certain past events that happened before I was really even alive or sentient enough to understand what was going on. And he just sort of took all these things and just force fed it to children, his own children, like something traumatic that happened to him regarding other family. He would just sort of look at us and go, you know what your mom did? You know what your grandmother did? She did this X, Y, and Z. And one of the things was honestly slightly laughable, which he claimed that my grandmother, my mother's mother, tried to sleep with him. And then when she rejected, or like when he rejected her, she ended up saying, you know what, that is the worst mistake you've ever made in your life, and I'm going to make sure you suffer for it. The attitude, I believe. The actual situation, I don't know, Daddy-O, but that sort of dynamic of constantly like being vicious towards each other existed on both sides. It was really like a Romeo Juliet sort of a situation. Um, that whole like family against family, and then they sort of pushed it on us, when they first got divorced. It was like, your father's the most awful evil man on the planet.
Okay, so in other words, just so I can like wrap my head around it. So in other words, because you know the backstories, I don't.
Yes.
So in other words, dad was slandering mom, mom was slandering dad, and it just got a really yucky divorce, and you decided not to really have much to do with dad since then?
No, the very first time they divorced, we ended up moving back to New Jersey, where we lived with my grandfather. Um, but during that time, I was very still. I had learned by observation how to achieve a goal. And so my father was like, tell your mom I love her. I want to be back together with her. And so I ended up being that
He was
front
putting you
runner.
in the middle.
Oh no, I put myself in the middle. I was like, I'm going to help you. I knew that I was going to manipulate my mother into getting back with my father, because I truly thought that was best, because I, wanted my family back together. I didn't want to live in New Jersey for a variety of reasons, and the main one being my grandfather at that time.
So
So,
how old were you when that first divorce happened?
yes, there are very few memories I have. Um, when we ended up moving up there, I believe I was either 7 or 8 years old. It is, I have very few memories before this time.
Okay.
Even this time is sort of, it's so hard to remember. Um, a lot happened during this time. So I was 7 or 8 years old. I remember my grandmother getting me off of the school bus as it was about to take me home, and I honestly believe like if I had ridden that school bus home, it wouldn't have turned out the way that it did. So I feel like that's one of the reasons I actually
So
have.
how long were they divorced?
They were divorced probably 3 years. I think I
Okay, so
was
you were
11.
still pretty young and you were trying to help dad get back together with mom.
Yes. So I would constantly go up to mom, and I would tell her every single day, hey, dad loves you. He wants to talk to you. Are you sure you don't want to talk to him? And every time we would go see him for summer visitation in Florida, because he still lived there when we lived in New Jersey, Edison at this point, we would go down to see him. And he would constantly talk about my mom and all of these things. And I remember actually looking at my dad, and I told him, I said, listen, I'll help you with this. But if you mess this up, I'm not going to help you again. I will never talk to you again if you mess this up. Do you understand me? And he was like, yes, of course, of course. And I was like, okay. I was a big boss baby. All right. And they ended up getting back together. I was about 11 years old. I was in fifth grade at the time. So I don't know. I remember literally praying on my knees upstairs as my grandfather, I was freaking out. He was like, "No, you're not going. That's not happening." And I was like, "It is," because I prayed to God. And I'm like, so
Hmm.
got in the car, and then we moved back to.
So kind of every kid's wish to have their parents get back together when they divorce. I
Yeah,
remember
I made sure of
listening
it.
to that too.
Like inspired action is what I had thought of it. I I wish so hard. I remember literally praying on my knees upstairs in the room, and I was like, "Please God, like I'll never ask for anything ever again except for me to like get A's on my like final exams. You know, like please, like just do this one thing for me." I asked for many things afterwards, clearly, because I was a child when I made that promise.
So
But
what's your relationship like with mom today? You
my
don't talk with dad now.
we
Um,
I don't really talk to dad now.
okay. Okay. And so with mom, what's relationship like with mom?
Um, I actually call my mom a bit more frequently. Our relationship was sort of non-existent for a while because my mother ended up becoming clinically like mentally not well. Um, and so our relationship sort of fell apart because when she couldn't fulfill her role as the mother, it fell upon me to do so. And then when I wasn't there, the situation just sort of got very, very bad.
So wait, okay. So like what do you mean you had to step in and fill the role as a mother for younger siblings, or what do you mean?
In the beginning, it was for my younger siblings,
And
yes.
so how old were you and they when that happened?
So my mother, you could always tell that really the only memory I have of my mom where she wasn't, you know, mentally askew was one day when she hadn't collapsed under the pressure yet. I was like 7. So by the time that we lived in New Jersey, it was sort of like a battering ram on her. She dated this guy. When she got back together with my father, she crumbled and she fell into like this psychosis.
Okay, so that you said that was around 11. So that happened when you were around 11 or 12-ish.
Yes. Um,
And you feel like you had to kind of step into the mother role with your younger siblings?
yeah, that was when her psychosis really started taking effect. Prior to that, it was sort of she was absent. She wasn't really, there. She was always working. So I had to make sure I was the key holder. I was the one that made sure everyone, got home safe. I made sure that the room was clean or else we were going to get beat. Um, that sort of older sibling. Um,
Okay. So do you feel like you have any like trauma or trapped emotions from the just kind of growing up almost parentless?
yes, I was parentless, and any parent that I ever really lived with, which I feel that this is a really important part of my trauma in the story, and that this particular aspect is what really shot it off was because my mother was not mentally well, and she had primary custody of myself and my younger siblings, but she lived in a home in Edison with our grandfather, her father, and her brother, and her older brother, so our uncle. And our uncle was, or he is, a retired Marine, so he's a veteran, and also a police officer, and definitely he was very rigid. You could tell that he had an emotional support animal, but he took out his anger from work, his frustrations, out on us, and he beat us very badly.
What? Okay, hold on. So like how old were you when he was doing all that?
Right. My father never like. I remember my father raising his hand like once to my brother, but that is all I remember of that. Um, my uncle though,
That's
he
okay.
would he would when we moved up, I was probably around the 8-year old mark. I remember him beating us severely for leaving grains of rice on his carpet. He wasn't used to children. I remember that. I remember one of the most severe was when, remember how I told you he had an emotional support animal? It was a husky. His name's Odie. And, rest in peace, Odie, because one day I was helping my mom, because again, older sibling, gotta help the parent. I was in the car with my mom, you know, helping her get things ready. We were going someplace. It's supposed to be fun. I was excited. And she told my younger siblings to like bring Odie inside from the backyard. And we were always told, do not open the back gate because we were directly connected to a main road. So he was like, don't open the back gate under any circumstance. However, at that point, I was probably 8, 9 years old, which meant that my little sister was probably 5 and my brother 7, right? So they went out into the backyard, and although we were very poor kids, they saw an ice cream truck on the main road, and they opened that gate. And when they opened that gate, Odie ran into the middle of the street, got hit by a car, he died. And so when my uncle came home, because obviously we weren't going anywhere, my uncle came home, you know, from work, very hard day at work at, you know, the police station. He came in, and he came in with the most, have you ever heard the phrase, don't be afraid when I'm loud, be afraid when I'm quiet? So he came in, and he came in with this sort of like calm demeanor. And this was the beginning of when I learned to be afraid of people. And he comes in, and we're all in the room, and we're like, I'm shaking, you know, just like thinking of the story. And he comes in, and he's like, today I lost my best friend because you guys didn't listen to me. And I'm shaking. Okay, I'm like, we are going to fucking die. We're gonna get, he had like an all metal belt, and he beat us with it. I was trembling, like we would kneel for hours, like on like carpet, on like hardwood. And my brother, socially awkward and adorable, I love him, but my brother had the audacity to look at this man who was seething underneath this calm like ocean, right? And he goes, well, at least Odie's in a better place now. Both me and Lucy were like, why would you say that? Because not only were we beat, okay, we were grounded, all of us. I wasn't even there. We were grounded for 3 months. We could not do anything. Not that we were really able to do anything or go anywhere. We weren't allowed to stay at other people's houses, no matter what parent. Like, it was not a thing. Like, we stayed home. If we didn't even have cable.
So he beat you guys with the metal belt over that, all 3 of you, even though you said you weren't even there?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember in that house.
Was okay with that? And your mom was okay with that?
My mom was just not present. Like, my mom just did not involve herself in those things. My mom was not capable of handling those things. And if my mom, you know, ever saw something, like, my mom also did her fair share of like brutal beatings. I remember one time me and my sister were playing, and this really caused like a strife. Like, the fact that they would abuse us over making like simple child, you know, like mistakes. I mean, granted, the Odie thing, I get why you would be upset. Still, don't beat your kids like that, you know, like I get it, punish them, like the grounding, like I get it, but the belt was not okay. But there was a particular situation in which my mom, I would say that it was a beating, because me and my sister, we were just sort of holding hands. We were spinning. We were doing that, right? In this same house. And because we were spinning so fast, we were laughing, and she escaped my grasp. And as the younger sibling does, you know, like that moment, you know, like she hit, like, it was so light. She went against like the window, and she like had this moment where she like contemplated whether or not she was going to scream. Like the younger children do it. He's like, will I have the mercy for you today? Because she knew it was going to happen to me. And she like took in a breath and I darted for the stairs. I was like, no! And so I was like, shit. And she was like, ah! She starts crying. My mom was on the phone at the time. And she's like, what happened? Runs out. She's marching out here. She's holding the phone. And I'm climbing the stairs, you know, like I'm running up it on all fours. And then she grows. And I think to myself, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to make it up the stairs. I'm going to be able to do it. I'm going to be able to lock the door. But she goes and she grabs my ankle, drags me down the stairs, and with her other hand that held the phone, that was now hung up, she went bam right on top of my head. Remember in Tom and Jerry, like the little, I literally had a bump, a physical bump on my head. Yeah.
So,
So
what was my question? Is your uncle around today?
that uncle, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he's around. I don't talk to
Did
him.
you ever think about finding him and just beating him? No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, you think that one's bad? Wait.
Oh my gosh. Like, I'd be like, okay, God, just forgive me, but I'm going to do this. And then you can forgive me afterwards.
No.
And then I would literally find him and beat him.
No, and he had the audacity to assume things about me later. But simultaneous, while we were living in that same house, my uncle would often be in and out, you know, working and things like that. Whom we would see more often was my grandfather, who lived in the basement.
Okay.
Now, I was really young when this, you know, first started happening. But like I said, we didn't have cable. I begged my mom like every Christmas for like an easy bake oven or just like anything of entertainment. You know, it took months for my mom to give me $20 for like a Tamagotchi, you know, at that time. And we got to watch Tom and Jerry and some old Mickey Mouse cartoons. Aside from that, the only cable we had was downstairs in the basement, which is where my grandpa lived. And so my grandfather would be really, really nice to me and my sister, but he would never be very nice to my brother. In fact, he would pull his ears, and the abuse got worse over time. But we would go down to the basement with my grandfather, and he would say, "Hey, would you like to do some exercises with Grandpa?" And so I remember him luring us, like it was just me. I would learn later that it wasn't us. But he would lure me, you know, this time I was like 7, 8. And what he would do is he would, one, touch me. Didn't know it was wrong. Like, never happened to me before. And he would like put me on his stomach, and I didn't understand male anatomy then, because I mean I was like 7, you know, like it would have been like another year before they taught me about periods. And it was definitely something that was not okay. I don't want to go too much into depth with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I was 8, 7 or 8 years old when this was happening, and I just wanted to watch some TV. So this would happen regularly, multiple times a week, until one day, my mother, you know, I have no idea that this is wrong, right? You know, I'm just thinking I'm spending time with Grandpa, and I'm going to watch some TV. And I realized one day as I'm on top of him, you know, and he's rocking me back and forth, that, or to and fro rather, that my mom, you know, she starts coming down the steps, and he flings me off of him. Flings me off of him. I almost fell off of his bed. And it was in that moment that I realized this isn't supposed to be happening. He was so afraid. Like, I'd never seen my grandfather afraid of anything, but he was afraid of my mother walking in. And so then I realized this was something bad. And I put 2 and 2 together over time. And I had to be very careful from then on. But I did not tell my mom. I knew my mom could not handle that, and I knew that we needed my grandfather, because without my grandfather, we would have been homeless. So I didn't tell my dad either, because I honestly felt like it was my fault. I felt gross. I felt disgusting. And the last thing I wanted was to tell someone and not be believed. I was afraid of what my grandfather would do to me or my uncle would do to me if I said something.
So, did he do it again after that, or you just stayed away from him?
I tried to, distance myself as much as possible, but he would find excuses. For example, this incident happened when I was 9. We moved to a different house in Paterson, New Jersey. And this is a very beautiful, big house. There was several different bathrooms. At this point, I was 9 years old. I know how to take a shower. And I was taking a shower by myself. I locked the door, and he ended up like coming in. He was like, "Hey, do you need help?" And I was like, "No, I'm good. Thank you." And he goes, "I think you need help." And I said, "No, no, I'm fine. Leave me alone." And he goes, "No, I think you need help." And then he took his hand and began to rub my 9-year-old genitals while I was in the shower. So, yeah, that was grandpa. I did not realize at the time that my sister was also being abused
By him?
by him. Yeah. Um, and uh, this added to, eventually over time I was, like praying on my knees, like, please, like, let us go back to dad, because whatever happened with dad could not have been worse than that. So we end up going back to live with my father for a couple of years. We live in a very rinky-dink rural town, Americus, Georgia. Like the nearest movie theater was like 50 miles away. There was really nothing to do. And we went from a nice town home to a very, we lived in the projects. It was the ghetto. There were 3-year-old children running around with broken beer bottles, smacking girls on the butt and saying the N-word, like that's like the hard N-word. And that was the environment that we lived in. We weren't able to go anywhere, talk to anyone. My dad refused to let us be alone in a room with a male that was not biologically related to us, or even go to a house in which a male lived that wasn't biologically related to us. So in this town, it was a very like black dominated school district that I had gone to. I was one of maybe 4 white kids, and I'm not white, I'm Latina, I'm half Puerto Rican, half Cuban. And so it was very, we didn't have a lot to mesh with, and I was a very shy, quiet girl, in like the corner of the room at that time. Not anymore. But during that time, we would have these cats. Like, eventually my dad felt bad for us. He bought us these cats, and he did not want them to constantly stay inside, so they would go outside. And one day my cats returned without tails. That's the neighborhood we lived in. There would be gunshots. There would be screaming, fights, domestic violence everywhere we went. I had a bike, but I had to share it. And my mom, during this time when we lived in America, so that's when her psychosis really kicked in. She was diagnosed with schizophrenia. She would tell us that she would be seeing demons, that she saw a demon on my sister's shoulder. She would tell me to do horrific things. Like, for example, she truly and wholeheartedly believed that my father was cheating on her. And so she looked at me as the oldest child, and she told me to walk up to like the main altar. We went to a Baptist church at this point. To walk up to the main altar and essentially tell like the pastor's like niece that she was a bitch and a whore, because she thought that that was the person that my father was cheating on her with. She posted like her like copies of her marriage certificate everywhere, and she had me do it, and it was mortifying. We went to different churches. She was the kind of person that begged for money, for pity. She lived off of it. Like it was her bread and butter. Like she stopped working entirely, and it was so embarrassing.
You mean, wait, your mom begged for money or begged for pity or both? Or I'm sorry, I'm trying to.
Both.
Okay, so she would like be standing on street corners or going up to people or.
No, like she would. How do I put this? We ended up going to a different church for a while
Okay.
because things just got very embarrassing at the original. And like I said, very black dominated area. The church that we had gone to was all Latino. Um, and so we went to a different one where I actually knew people from school. And she ended up just like, she would do this thing where she would end up sobbing. You know, like if anyone, you know, like if she could like milk $1, you know, like through her tears, then she would, and she would accept it. And I had this hardcore bent thing, and I think I still have it, where it's like, I don't want your pity money. I don't want, like, don't look at me like you're sad for me. Don't be sad for me. You know, like I hate it. I hate those eyes. You know, like you tell someone you're, you know, like my story, and they look at me like, oh, this poor unfortunate soul. I'm like, I'm not Ariel, okay? Like, don't look at me like that. And it's like this burning hatred for pity because of my mom and the way that she would accept money and things like that. I remember sitting in this church, and this really nice woman, she tried to hand me a 20, and I said, no, thank you. I don't need it. And she looked at me like she was offended that I did not receive her money. And then she gave it to my mom. So thank you, lady. We did need it. I was too prideful to have taken your money. But yeah, so things got started to get very toxic with my father at this point. When we lived in that very ghetto neighborhood, it was the beginning of the end. My mom was not able to stand up for us in any context at all. I mean, she would say something and then she would go back on her word. She would start to sleep all day. This was the beginning of that. Because they put her on several medications. They would get into physical altercations. I saw my mother get arrested. I saw her bleed and my father bleed because they got into a domestic altercation. And then my father, you know, I ended up making one friend. There was one girl who lived across the street from me. And my one friend, and I was like, oh my God, like Jesus is with me. He gave me a friend. And she was older than me. I was 12 at this point. She was 16. I ended up getting a crush on her, and that was when I, you know, started to figure out like, this isn't normal. Like, you know, that was a whole rubbing the wrong way, but I never told anyone about that. And so I would, you know, like I kept it to myself, like she didn't even know. And I just wanted to spend time with my friends. Like I wasn't gonna bite a bullet. I just wanted to have a friend. And my father would not allow that because she had a brother, an older brother who was in college, who didn't even live there. But because he existed and he knew that he existed, he would not let me go over there. And she did not want to come over here because, I mean, they were getting into domestic altercations constantly. And my father was scary when he yelled. So I would, you know, go over there, and then my dad would be like, no, you need to return home. And this one day I was just so beat up about it. I would just watch anime. Luckily, some months we had internet and other months we didn't. But when we afforded it, I watched all the anime in the world. And I was on my computer. I asked my mom, I was like, Mom, tomorrow is Amanda's birthday. Can I please go to her house? You know, I just for her birthday. And she was like, you know, your father's not gonna like it. And I was like, you know what? Forget it. You're not gonna stand up for me. I guess I can't do anything. And then she was like, no, you know what? You can. And I was like, really? I can go to her house? And she goes, yeah, you can. I was like, well, what about Dad? And she goes, I'll handle your father. Don't worry about it. So I'm over here. I'm like, yeah, got my mom back. She's got her swagger back. I'm going over. So I dart over to Amanda's house. I'm like, guess who's here for your birthday, Amanda? I have nothing to give you but my presents, but I'm here. So, and so we would start to have a great time. She had a couple of her own friends over. She was the person who introduced me to Sims, so we were playing that. It was great for like an hour until my sister ended up knocking on the door, and she was like, hey, Dad wants you back. I was like, no, Mom said that I can stay. And she was, yeah, no, Dad says you need to come back. Mom says you need to come back. And I was like, okay, like, I'm thinking, and so I come over, my dad's like, why are you over there? I told you not to go over there. And I was like, her brother's not even there right now. I was like, you want to go check? Like, you can literally, I will walk with you and you can go check to see if the mail is there. Okay? Like, we are willing to accommodate for your ridiculousness right now. Okay? I just want to go to my friend's house. And he's like, no. I said no. And at a certain point of essentially being isolated from the entire world, not being able to see anyone, have any friends, you know, I was literally just on the internet. I didn't go outside for like ever, which is probably why the coronavirus pandemic thing didn't hit me so hard, was because I was used to just being inside all the time. But it came to a point where me and my dad were in a screaming match, and I was like, I'm not gonna fight you with this. And, you know, I was like, I'm going back over there whether you like it or not. So I opened the door and he goes, you leave that door and you're no longer my daughter. Do you understand me? And so I had this moment, right, where I was like, I'm opening the door. And like a piece of my heart like broke. But then there was this part of me that was like, I don't even care about you. And so I turned to him and I was like, then I guess you're no longer my dad. And I walked away. And for the rest of that sleepover. And so I did not speak to him for 2 months until my mother finally packed everything. We packed in garbage bags. We had this very like broken down car, and he tried to break it to stop us from leaving. And as we were leaving, I was like grabbing all things. I was the only person who wanted to stay because I actually have a friend now that had a little bit of, you know, feelings for. And so I ended up taking like all these bags over into the car. I wasn't even talking to my dad. It'd been 2 months. He was trying to get on my good side. I was like, no, you don't get to talk to me like that and make this world ending ultimatum and then not have repercussions. Okay? Because no. So I was like, you could try that with Mom. You're not trying it with me. So I went, grabbed all the bags, put it in there. And as I was going down the steps to finally like load up in the car, he would start yelling things like in Spanish, because he only speaks Spanish to this day. And he called me like slurs. You know, he called me, you know, a bitch and a witch and all these nasty things. And he blamed me for the divorce. He was like, did Anita put you up to this? It was freaking Anita's idea, isn't it? I'm like, oh yeah, sure. It was my idea for Mom to divorce you when you guys are getting into fights and the police is being called. Sure, okay. And so we ended loading up in the car. And we went to a women's shelter for approximately another 2 months. Where I pray to God, and this like where I sort of started to begin to understand the concept of like angels and spirit guides, but I didn't understand what it was. But it was like the beginning of that, because I got like signs from the universe, and I was like, oh, I'm communicating with the spirits. Like I thought it was so special. Then I found spirituality years later. But we ended up moving back with my grandfather.
Oh no.
Yes. And
so how old are you about this time?
I was 12, about to be 13. Yeah, I was turning 13. Like it was literally like a month after the woman's shelter, and then I turned 13. So really we'll just say 13.
Okay. She was 13 at this point.
So 13, we moved to, I didn't think that the place could get worse. All right. I moved to Jersey City, New Jersey. All right. So right across from New York City. And it was not a nice place. There was a murder on our block. Like across.
So your grandfather had moved at this point?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So we moved to Jersey City. Still worked for the same airport that he had, but different place of living. And while we were there, a few things happened. I made the conscious decision that year to stop being the girl in the corner, because they had been
being the what?
the girl in the corner, you know, the
Oh,
quiet,
okay.
hushed girl in the corner that never said anything to anyone. You know, in the third grade, I literally didn't take a test because the pencil lead of my pencil broke, and I could not get the courage to raise my hand to ask the teacher for a new pencil. If and I say this seriously, if in my childhood before I turned 13, a anyone like in a car was like, hey, get in the car, they did not have to trick me with a puppy or candy or a popsicle or ice cream or whatever. I would just hop in their car. I had no way of
Voice.
defending myself because no one, everyone was so busy fighting, they never taught me anything. You know,
Mhm.
I had no, so I was protective over others, just not over myself. Like I just didn't know how to value myself because no one valued me. So, um, 13 years old, I was like, okay, obviously no one's gonna teach me this, so I'm gonna teach it myself. And I ended up amping myself up at recess this one year. And I went and I talked to these two girls who become my friends, who then would attract other friends, one of which is my current fiance. And I was a little happy part of that. And then at the time, there was a sort of situation in that school year where I would essentially begin to rebel after everything that had happened to me. It was very light rebelling, but I ended up getting this crush on this other girl who was very insistent. Um, but I was like, okay, this is a new thing. Let's try that. And my like we would hang out in big friend groups. I never did anything that was like really inappropriate. I didn't lose my virginity young. I didn't do any of that. I was genuinely a good kid. What I was guilty of was coming home late, 15 minutes late from my cutoff time. Granted, I would not give my own kid a 9:40, like a 9:30 p.m. curfew in a place like Jersey City. I wouldn't do it, but you know, she did, and I broke it by 15 minutes because I missed the bus. And I would hang out with my friends. They made sure I got home safe. So it was a pretty good situation in my eyes if it wasn't for my grandfather. Um, there was a situation where my grandfather would look at me when I was 13 years old, and he was like, "Hey, why don't you come and hang out with Grandpa? We'll do some exercises like the old times." And I said, "No, I'm never doing exercises with you ever again. You get me?" He shut up, backed away into his little cave, and he did not talk to me about it ever again.
Mm.
Because in that moment, I saw it in his eyes that he knew what it was.
He knew you were
He
old
knew
enough
that
to
I
know
knew
what was going
what
on.
it was.
Yeah.
That I was some stupid little girl. However, that did internalize. Like what I think happened is that it internalized in this form of jealousy, which will again come in later in my later years, in my late teens. But
So he never talked to you again after that, you said.
no, he didn't talk to me about that subject ever again. Now I was
Okay.
hanging out with my friends after school, things like that, basic things, and he saw because my grandfather was very prejudiced. He's not even prejudiced; he was racist. And my current fiance saw me hanging out with him. We were just friends at the time, platonic, longest friend zone guy, and um, he saw him, and he's Dominican. But when you see a Dominican, you don't see Dominican. You see Afro, you know, like skin. You see dark skin. And so I remember I was grounded because I came home 15 minutes late. Um, and then he came to visit me because I wasn't allowed to leave the stoop, like the steps in front of the thing. And so I'm just sitting on the steps, and my grandfather, he sees that this guy is talking to me. He's like, "You're grounded. You're not supposed to talk to anybody," you know. And he gets into my friend's face. He gets in, you know, my fiance back then, 13-year-old face, saying she doesn't hang out with guys like you. You're trash, you know, like in his face. And I'm like, I'm in front of him. I'm like, don't yell at my friend. Like, it's not his fault. Okay, like, you know, I missed the bus. It was entirely my fault. Don't yell at him. And he's like, get out of the fucking way. I'm not talking to you. And he like jerked me out of the way to go and talk to Jordy. Um, if you ask him about it now, he'll tell you I don't remember that at all. And I'm like, it was one of the most scarring moments, the most embarrassing moments of my life, and he doesn't even remember it. I'm like, how dare you? But it was from that point where he would get mad if I like was with anyone or had any semblance of fun. I remember there was this one day after I had come out to my mother, because at the time I had believed I was a lesbian. Fun fact, I'm not. But at the time, you know, I came out to my mom, and my mom just simply went over her head. She was like, "No, you're not." And I was like, "Mom, me and Ebony, we're dating. We've kissed. Okay, like this is more than just a friend." She's like, "No, you're just friends." I'm like, "Okay." Like clearly you don't. And then she would try to match me up with my guy friends, and I'm like, "No, Mom, I'm in a relationship and it's not with them." But she would be like, "Oh, have fun on your date with Jonathan." And I'm like, "No, Mom, it's not, no." Um, but I guess my grandfather like caught wind of the fact that I was hanging out with boys. And I remember I was in the kitchen, very littered, hoarding type of place. He wanted everything. Anyway, so he comes in and he's like, "Do you have a boyfriend?" I was like, "No." And so he comes up to me, not believing me, and he grabs my hair and he yanks it back to face him. You know, he's like craning my neck in such a way that if he just like flicked it, he would have broken my neck. And so I'm just staring at him. You know, he's like grabbing onto the back of my head, and he's like, "I'm gonna ask you again. Do you have a boyfriend?" And me, as clever as I was, you know, understood what he was saying. Like, "Are you in a relationship?" But I didn't take it as that. I took it literally, and I looked at him and I was like, "No, I don't have a boyfriend." And in my mind, I went, "I have a boyfriend." And so I, you know, look, you know, you had to like take the little victories, you know. Um, and that was the sort of demeanor that he had. He would often wake us up by like breaking a broomstick on our back, like that was a thing for him. My brother got it way worse. I was out hanging out with my friends, and because I was no longer participating in these exercises with my grandfather, I did not realize this because my sister and I really didn't talk, because we just had like a lot of animosity, um, because our parents essentially pitted us against each other. Um, but she ended up taking my place, and it got worse for her.
Oh.
Yeah.
So he was exercising with her.
Yes, but it got worse for her. Like there was recordings involved. Yeah, and I didn't know.
So he was actually like probably having sex with her and stuff.
No, I I wouldn't say like physical penetration,
Okay.
genitalia, but everything else, like literally everything else.
Okay. Did he ever get caught or busted for this or go to jail or anything?
um,
Huh?
I said we'll get there.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
So
So gosh, and you really just didn't have much of a relationship with your sister at this point because you guys
no,
didn't really get along, you said.
no.
Okay.
I had more of a relationship with my brother, who was more severely beaten. I was gone. My brother got severely beaten, and then my
By the
sister
grandfather.
place. Yes, by the grandfather. Yes,
Okay, so where's the uncle? Is he not living with you guys anymore?
not living with us anymore.
That was a good thing.
Yeah, you discovered one of them left. So after this, you know, period of
We
time,
see I'm sorry, we see where the uncle got it though. I mean, he was probably severely beaten by his dad, who was now beating your brother, and then the
mhm,
uncle would beat you guys.
mhm,
You got this
yeah,
generational thing going
yeah,
on.
hmm.
Okay.
And then summer came, and my mother looked at me and she said, "You're gonna spend summer with your aunt." And something in my gut said, "This is fishy." Something in my gut told me I wasn't coming back. She didn't say it, but I felt it. And I did not, I did not like it. I didn't want to acknowledge that feeling. I was like, no, no, I don't want to go. I want to be here with my friends, you know. And really the reason she sent me away, she said it was because I was rebelling, and things like that. I did end up calling my mother the B word. I've said it like twice now. But I don't feel well saying the B word and my mother in the same sentence anymore. That was a rebellious thing I did, but I got slapped straight across the face for it, and I deserve that one. Because you don't do that to your mama. Like, she just was mentally unwell, and she couldn't do her job, you know? And so she ended up sending me away to live with my Aunt V. Aunt V had 3 very young children, the oldest of which was probably 3 or 4 when I first got there. And she had an 8-month-old baby and a boy who was about to turn 2. So full house. Her husband was also a veteran Marine, and lovely man. Still love him. I just gotta say it. He's a great man. His mother taught me how to make a banana pudding, and it is the best in the world. Okay, Country Women's banana pudding is the best. Anyway, so we, like, her house is a mess. Like, she has me like help. She takes me to Disney World. It's the first time I'm ever in a place that didn't look, smell, was garbage. Okay, like, it was the first place. Like, although it was a little, like, it was a bit of a wreck because of children. It wasn't a bad place to be. And so I had no semblance of that. I just wanted to go back to my garbage town to return to my friends. Did I lose you?
No, I'm here.
Okay. So eventually my aunt sits me down. My uncle is not home. The kids are napping. And she sits me down on this cream-colored couch that would be my bed for the next 2 years. 3 years? 3. And she sits me down and looks at me. And she goes, okay. So I want you to take this time now to, if there's anything that you need to tell me, then here, I'm open.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. She's like, you can take this time, like, I want to give you this moment to tell me anything that it is that you feel you need to tell me. Looking back, I'm sure she expected me to tell her something like, I've been having unprotected sex, or I've been doing drugs, or something of, like something you would find in a soap opera or Degrassi or something. And what she got was, when I was really little, my grandfather would sexually assault me. And I gave her every detail every time he touched me. Even when we no longer did exercises, how he would come into the shower and he would finish the job himself. I gave her every detail. And she took a moment to process in the same way that my mom took a moment to process,
So hold on, pause. Was this her father also?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So she took a moment to process in the same way my mother took time to process me giving her the information that I was a lesbian. I had the same response that went, I don't think my father would ever do such a thing.
Oh.
And we did not speak of it ever again. Until years go by, right? And my aunt is one of the most influential, trauma-inducing people I've ever met in my life. As awful as my grandfather was, as awful as the beatings were, she did not have to touch me to break my soul. And what she did was she invited me into her home and made me the mother of those children, because while she had those children and, in pageantries and things like that in the beginning, she decided she wanted to do them. She wanted to be a model. She wanted to be an actress because, you know what? She got robbed of having that young adult life because she married a Marine man, right? And when they typically have children young because they're going off to war, right? They get married young because they're going off to war, which ends up putting that woman's life on pause. She didn't expect to get pregnant, but she did. And so the other kids came. And she decided that now that I was here, this must have been her signal from the universe to go and live her life. So I cooked for those kids. If they ate, it's because I cooked for them. If they were bathed, it's because I bathed them. Okay? If they were loved, if they felt loved when they were taken care of because I took care of them. I missed out on school days because she needed to go and do that, and my uncle was a fireman, and he would work, you know, like 2 days on, 1 day off, you know, that sort of a schedule. So I would literally miss school to be with these kids. And in order to be in her home, you know, I had rules. It was to make sure that the house was clean, to make sure that the kids were taken care of, and to make sure that I had good grades. Because the C did not stand for college. So they were like, those are the 3 rules. It was a very long time until I got a cell phone. And when I did, it was like a little flip phone. Like, it wasn't like a smartphone, but I was still so excited. I loved those kids. I loved them with every fiber of my being. Those are my babies. And to this day, they are my babies. And my aunt would typically not be there, and would just sort of let, you know, like, discipline just go out the window. My uncle would come home, and like, when the kids were misbehaving or something, he would give them like a couple of pops on the bottom, you know, like, it would always be like open hand on the butt, and it wouldn't be very hard, which I would never do that to my son. But in comparison to what I had experienced as a child, that was, you know, I could have done that, you know, I could have taken that no problem, you know, but I wouldn't do that to my kid now, you know, like, I just thought that it was regular, you know, that this was just something that was supposed to happen because that's all I knew. And so I would call Uncle Dave and I'd be like, hey, the kids aren't listening. I've done everything. I've done every other tactic, taking away their toy, their snack, their, you know, let's go in timeout, let's distraction, let's read, you know. If it didn't work, I had to eventually call Uncle David, and Uncle David handled the situation. They wouldn't do it again. So that ended up causing a scenario. His mom, the wonderful woman that taught me how to make a mean banana pudding, caused a little bit of drama herself within that situation. But overall, myself, my uncle, and the kids got along. I did eventually make friends. I became part of the theater department, and I was really good at theater. It was really good. It was something I always wanted. I knew my mom was good at poetry. She was good at French, and I know she was, you know, like they were part of like the theatrical, you know, artistry. And I wanted to be part of that. You know, I wanted to live out something, you know, like have a good legacy of my mom. But my aunt would do this thing. And the thing that she did was, if I ever messed up, if I ever didn't like the way she talked to me, or like, yeah, if I ever didn't like the way she talked to me, she would do this thing where she would go, if you don't like it, you can go back to New Jersey. Yeah. And at that point, I wanted so badly to stay. Even though I felt like she hated me, I wanted to stay because I knew that Jersey City wasn't going to give me the same education that Palm Beach was going to give me, that Jupiter, Florida was going to give me. Like, I was a full-time dual enrollment student. You know, I was able to do these things and get farther. And the thing that pumped me up every day was, I'm going to become better. I'm going to be able to be a nurse. Anesthetist was what I wanted to be. I'm going to be able to, you know, take my mom and my brother and my sister away from that awful place. I'm never going to have to see grandpa ever again. Like, we're going to be able to do this. And so every time she would like embed her nails into me, every time, you know, she would, you know, essentially make me feel like I was worthless. Like, I had absolutely no value outside. Like, I was not loved. You know, if I went to bed and the dishes weren't done, the hell that was raised the next day was ridiculous. Like, you would think that I spat in her face. My mother finally sent me money in like junior year for prom. Got to go to prom because I had a senior boyfriend at the time. And she sent me like $765, and me being the Virgo that I am, I was like, I'm gonna save that money for college. I'm gonna save it for a car. And then, you know, my best friend Lexi, she was like, hey, I wanted to go prom dress shopping. And I said, oh, I really want to save it. She goes, you know what, we're gonna go to Ross. You know, they have like $12 dresses. I was like, you know what, I can spare $12, you know, to go and get a dress from Ross. And so I went over and, you know, I asked my aunt, and I was like, hey, do you think it'd be, you know, like possible, like, remember when you told me like that mom sent me money, like, because dad sent money for me, like, do you think it's possible for me to like get that money? So, because, you know, like Lexi, she like called me and she told me, you know, that we should, you know, go get dresses. And I was so nervous. That's exactly how I said it. And so I'm in like her master bedroom and she looks at me and she goes, how do you think we paid the bills this month? And my face just entirely fell because I never asked for anything of her. I never asked for anything, ever. Just wanted a dress. And my face fell. And there was just like this thing in her eyes, like I couldn't replicate it if you asked. And she looked at me and she goes, what's that face for? Change your face. And I just turned around and I walked away. It was so heart-wrenching. You know, I just wanted a dress. And so what she ended up doing, I still have the pictures, she gave me one of her dresses from the 90s. And she ended up paying to get my hair done. My hair, or not my hair done, my makeup done. And yeah, that's what happened for prom. There was no, that $765 was out the window. Apparently my dad had sent way more money. My grandfather pocketed that. And eventually, you know, like my uncle and I, we had built a rapport. You know, my aunt would very often, she had this thing where she like wanted something on me. I tried my very best to be perfect because I didn't want to leave. But at some point, it was to spite her. I'm just going to say it, okay? At some point, it was to spite her because she would look for any detail of anything that was wrong with me. Like, oh, she got a C, she's hanging out with the wrong crowd, she's doing all these bad things. Nothing. She could find nothing on me. And she would often tell my uncle to take my phone so that he could go through my phone. And it got to a point where my uncle looked at her one day and said, no, I'm not going to look through her phone. You want to look through her phone so bad? Then you do it. Because I know very well that Anita is not the kind of person that you think she is. I was so shocked because I didn't need to speak for my uncle to hear me. He understood me and accepted me into his family. He tried so hard to make me be part of the family. It was my own blood going against me. My aunt would not let me wear tank tops, would not let me wear shorts, would not let me wear like short dresses. She would often tell me this thing where she goes, you can either show chest or you can show leg, but if you show both, you're a slut. So, and then she would come home and do both. I couldn't do both. I was allowed to wear tank top. You know, I wasn't allowed to wear a two-piece bathing suit. You know, I couldn't wear like those pajamas around the house, even though I lived with them for 4 years. And then came a time where we ended up moving to like this big, wonderful new construction house. Like the smell of new construction house was just out of the world. Okay, like it was just amazing. And so we moved. I'm a full-time dual enrollment student. They ended up having to replace me with an actual maid because I could no longer clean the house because I was full-time dual enrolling. And probably back up a little bit. Before we moved, we ended up visiting New Jersey. My brother and sister, like, we didn't get to see each other a lot, so sometimes we would go over there for like winter break or something. And one winter break, we went up there. I remember it was like slushy everywhere. We pulled up to this hospital where Grandpa was at. Apparently, he wasn't feeling very well. And so, you know, me knowing very well like what this person is and like sitting with it, and you know, high school teaches you a lot more things, you know, than you would learn when you were a child. And so I'm sitting there, you know, feeling very awkward. And then both my aunt and my mom come out of this like hospital area and they come into the lobby where me and my brother and my sister are waiting, and they're just sobbing. And then they tell us that Grandpa has stage 4 colon cancer. So, we ended up going back. My aunt is distraught. She's like so sad. And I had no idea at this time, but apparently my sister had confessed to my aunt the same thing that I told her.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And my aunt did nothing. Again, she had two little girls telling her. Like at some point, especially when the two girls are separate and they don't really talk, if you have two separate people telling you the same thing, even if you don't want to believe it, somewhere in your brain, you know. Somewhere in your brain, you know. But here's the thing that like boggles me, Tracy, was that he was getting sicker. His chemo wasn't working. The man wasn't going to recover. So you know what she does? She brings him into her home with these three little children that she turned into my babies. So this situation gets worse because my grandfather expects that now that he is sick, that I should be incredibly loving and accepting of him. And that is not something I was willing to do because I had grown somewhat of a backbone in the time that he had not seen me. And apparently in that absence, he had projected my future to be prostitution. I learned that through the grapevine, and I remembered it, as he complained that I wasn't loving enough because this is what he said, he was upset because I wouldn't sit on his lap and give him kisses to greet him when I came home from school.
So this is when you're in high school?
Yeah. He expects me to sit on his lap and give him kisses as I come home from school. And I refuse to do it. And Veronica, Aunt V,
Okay.
is very upset. And she looks at me and she goes, "That's very offensive that you won't greet your grandfather," knowing full well what I told her years ago. And it's not like she had never experienced any sense of sexual assault because during the time that I lived with her, she did confess to me that when she was young, one of her cousins had apparently touched her, you know, and she did not like that. So the fact that she doesn't register that it might be in the family, after two people told her and that situation happened to her, is disgusting. And so she's yelling at me because I refuse to do that action for him. And now he's trying to be alone with the kids in the room with the door shut. See, this is where shiz went wrong, okay? Because those are my babies now. And she could neglect her babies and go and make movies and go and do whatever the heck it was that she wanted. But I was born and bred to be a mother, a nurturer. And my booty was not going to let this man be alone in the room with the kids. So I couldn't physically take the kids from him. I still wanted to stay. So I had to find a mediating way to handle this. So what I would do is whenever he closed the door, I would open it.
Whenever he would what?
Whenever he would close the door with the kids in it, I would
Okay.
open it. Would open that door. And he would constantly do it. He would constantly close the door. And then I'd be like, "No, we're leaving this door open." And he was like, "Close the door." And I said, "No." So he once again complains to Veronica. And I go, "No." Like she wants him to be alone with the kids in the room. So I'm thinking either this woman does not care that my sister and I were sexually assaulted, and she just believes that he won't do it to her kids, like her kids are special, and that we're trash, or she was in a hardcore willful ignorance.
Right.
And that I refuse to believe the willful ignorance. Like that was just so selfish. And to top the cake, right, of the situation with Grandpa, in this home, we had a study room, which is where I did all my full-time dual enrollment stuff. There was a deer mounted on that wall, and it was creepy. And so I'm doing all of my stuff. My uncle comes into the room, and he goes, "Hey, Anita, I want you to turn off the light, okay? When you're done studying in the main room." It was right next to his master bedroom, so I was like, "Why don't you do it?" But okay, whatever. Yeah, sure, I'll do it. I was busy. And so about after 5 minutes, I was like, oh, you know what? I don't need that light on right now. We had like these little walking night lights on the ground, so I didn't need it, like that big light. So I walk over to his main door, right? And I go and I turn off the light, but I see movement in the hallway, like across the way, and I'm like, what the? Because throughout my life, I had seen like almost like energy spirits like move, and so I was like, what is that? So I turn on that light, and then I'm like, Grandpa, is that you? And it's like really quiet, but then you hear like of him walking, and he meets my eyes from like that hallway, and he goes, "What were you doing in his room?" And I go, "I wasn't in his room. I was turning off the light. This is where the light is. He told me to turn off the light. I'm in the study, studying, and I don't need this light on, so I was turning it off." And he goes, "Okay, but why were you in his room?" And I said, again, I wasn't in his room. He goes, "What were you doing in his room?" And I said, for the last time, I was not in his room. I was studying. He goes, walk back. And I thought it was very strange. Because again, he got jealous that I would not sit on his lap and give him kisses.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that I wouldn't do exercises with him, and he got upset that my friend showed up at my doorstep. And then he just immediately assumed that my friend was my boyfriend. He just immediately assumed that I was in that bedroom alone with my uncle. And him being the person to do that to me as a child assumed that I would do that with my uncle, who was the only good parental figure I ever had. And he was not related to me. And so I return to the study, and I'm just so irritated, and I start shaking because everything's like compounding pressure, because I'm like, I gotta make sure these kids don't get assaulted. I gotta make sure that my full-time dual enrollment stuff is working. I gotta make sure I learn how to drive. My car was breaking down, all of these things, right? And so I was like, okay, you know what? I'm not studying tonight. I'm just going to the room. It's ruined for me today. I'm going to the room. Next day happens. My uncle is driving us in his truck over to school. It's a whole hour away in order to drop off the kids and then drop me off. And so I'm just quiet. My leg is bouncing. I'm trying to hold back tears. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. At this point, I was contemplating running away. I was like, I can't abandon these kids. What do I do? And in my mind, I'm like, Uncle David deserves to know. If I was a parent, if I biologically created them, I would want to know. Like he would hate me knowing that I kept this from him and that he's here. And I was like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Like, there's got to be a loophole. There's got to be a thing I can do. And Uncle David's like, what is wrong? Like, you were so quiet. Is it Veronica again? Like, did Veronica say something to you? And I was like, no, I'm fine. Just leave it. Just drop it. Just drop it. And he would not. Because my uncle heard me when no one else did. So my uncle would press and press and press until he got it out of me. And so I'm just there and I'm shaking and things. He's like, is it Grandpa? And my leg just automatically stopped shaking. He's like, what's wrong? Grandpa. And I said, he makes me feel uncomfortable. And I don't like him alone in a room with the kids. And he goes, what happened? And I said, I can't say. But my uncle heard me. And my uncle that very day because he knew what was going to happen. He knew that would be the beginning of the end. And he looked at me and he goes, Anita, I want you to know that no matter what happens, it wasn't your fault. The only person to ever tell me that. And so, that very day, I returned home, and that man is not there. Because he called my aunt on the way back, and he said, you get rid of that man, or I'm going to kill him. So you figure it out. So, he found out, the truth. He talked about it. I ended up staying.
Wait, you ended up telling your uncle everything?
No.
Okay.
Eventually, over time, he got very he did not get any particular detail. I did not need to tell him. He did not need to know details. He knew that I felt uncomfortable. He knew that I did not lie. He knew that I built my character well. He knew that I had nothing to hide and that I would not lie to him. Because I trusted him and he trusted me with the lives of his own children. He literally taught me how to shoot a gun in case we had an intruder. And he was like, this is what you do. And when you shoot to kill. And I was like, yes. And he was like, you're okay with this? And I was like, I love these kids as much as you do. And I was like, I will shoot to kill if an intruder comes to my house. This is Florida. I was like, I could do that. And so although I was like shaking and things like that, I was like, no, I'm we were on the same page. We understood, and there was a mutual respect, a father-daughter relationship. And so I got to spend the night at my friend Lexi's house. And I ended up getting a phone call the next day when I returned to school. And it was her crying and her apologizing. She was like, you know what? You were right. And it was so strange.
Wait, hold on. Who said you were right? You're right?
My aunt. My aunt called me, the one who had to figure out what to do with him. She called me and she was like, you know what? You're right. It was not right of me to force you to, sit on his lap and give him kisses. Like, it was inappropriate. I made you feel uncomfortable and I'm sorry. But my aunt's apologies did not come with heartwarming resolutions because it was very strained. The tension, you literally couldn't cut it. It was so densely built, and it just seemed like she wanted to strangle me, and that's how she looked at me. And I was like, I don't understand why you hate me. It's not like I killed him. Like, why are you looking at me like that? She ended up not allowing me to, because my uncle was my driver, because she drove horrifically. She almost ran over my foot, because she was mad one day at me. She was mad. So she nearly ran over my foot. She wouldn't let me get in the car. I was like half in the car and she nearly ran over my foot. She often crashed cars. She had zero depth perception, which is why she couldn't fly planes in the Air Force. She was part of the Air Force. And she was like reservation. But she ended up taking my phone. As much as I wasn't she didn't care where I was as long as I wasn't alone with my uncle. She said, Uncle David's no longer going to drive with you. I'm going to be your driver. And I said, no, you're not. She goes, why not? And I'm like, because you're a horrible driver and Uncle David is my driver. Because I was catching on that people were thinking, I caught on that as my grandfather left.
Yeah, he probably told her.
Yeah. That random thing. And so she took my phone for no reason and, just took it. I no longer had a phone and I had my iPad to communicate. That was it. So if I wasn't connected to Wi-Fi, I was directionally challenged. I have no way of navigation. So still am directionally challenged. And it came to a time where we once again did that very long drive. She was driving the car, nearly ran over my foot again. She was talking to me in such a way in front of the kids that the kids thought it was okay to talk to me in that demeaning way. And so her oldest, who reminds me a lot of me, one day she looked at me and she was like, the Nutella's gone because Anita eats all of it because you're going to get fat. And so I looked at this little girl and I was like, no, you're not going to talk to me like that. Okay? That is not a nice thing to say, and you are not going to talk to me like that. Okay? And so my aunt, hearing that I'm like speaking to her daughter for the first time in a stern tone, she comes in, she goes, what's going on? And I'm like, what's going on? And I snapped. I was like, what's going on is the fact that you can't control your emotions, and it's reflecting on your kids, and now your kids think that they can talk to me like I'm garbage. That's what's going on. Zoom past her, went into the car, closed door, and freaking like shaking, Different day, she takes us down, right? She drops off the kids, and I'm gonna be, like early for class typically on this day. And we drop off the baby. We're sitting in the car, and the car's not moving. It's parked, it's emergency park on. And then she looks at me and she goes, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me first? And I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, you know exactly what I'm talking about, Grandpa. And I'm sitting here bamboozled, okay? And I look at her and I'm like, I did. On that cream-colored couch that you had me sleep on for 3 years because you didn't think I was worthy enough of a bed. I did. I did tell you. She goes, you didn't give me any details. And I said, I gave you every detail. Where he touched me, when he touched me, how often he touched me. I told you everything. She goes, no, you didn't. You didn't. She starts smacking onto her steering wheel like a mad woman, screaming off the top of her lungs. And I counted how many times she did it. But she went, you bitch, you bitch, you bitch, like literally over and over and over, smacking on the steering wheel. My heart feels like it's gonna stop because it was when it finally hit me that she never loved me. This was my favorite aunt from childhood. She took me to Disney World for the first time. Sure, she told me that my smile was ugly and pulled awful pranks on me as a 5-year-old, but that was the most love I ever got that young. And she never loved me. She used me until my use was nothing. And then I caused her trouble. And so she got to wail. Because eventually that man got to die, and I got to live with it. It was a few months after that, like not even a few months, I would say a couple of weeks, I knew that I was leaving. I wasn't allowed to be in the same room as my uncle anymore, and I thought it was just her punishing me. Like, I didn't fully process that she thought that it was a relationship like that. I thought she was just doing it to be mean to me, to isolate me before I left, to take away everything that I had. And she was pretty good at that, but I was happy because at least I had, like the kids. And then came a day where for my winter break, she comes into the room and in a very monotone voice, I was on my iPad, was talking to my best friend Lexi again. She opens the door. She goes, hey, pack your bags. You're going to spend winter vacation with your mom and and that sounded very similar when my mom told me you're going to spend summer vacation with your aunt. And I knew because my uncle was not there and he would not be back in time to do anything. I had no phone to contact him, and if I used my iPad, she'd probably break it on my face. So I called my best friend Lexi and I told her it's happening. I'm losing everything. She started crying and I was crying because it was awful. But I wasn't allowed to cry in front of her. It would like if she had any semblance of humanity, it would make her feel bad and then it would make her hate me more. And I wasn't going to do that to the kids. Because I saw what happened when my parents fought and I didn't like it. I was so tired of being the big person, but I still had to be it. So we got in that car and it was like a 2.5, 3 hour drive. And so I just really enjoyed like the kids. So like packed up the Christmas presents that Uncle David got me. Because I know it was Uncle David. And we drove up to Orlando. And she like carried out my things. The majority of my clothes were still there and everything, right?
We're still at the house?
Yeah, I didn't get them back. And we walk into this, again, crappy neighborhood. And it was a 1-bedroom apartment in which my grandmother, my mother's mother, my mother, my brother, my sister, and I would live in until I found us another apartment. It was 5 people, plus my grandmother's boyfriend, so make that 6. I remember hearing them doing the do. Imagine just like literally just hearing your grandmother get plowed. Like you're like, this is just insult to injury, God. Like, why are you doing this? But the thing that hurt the most out of everything was the fact that I was looking at those kids knowing how I wasn't going to see them anymore. Because I love them. I love them. I have a son now, and listen, that's great. And people would tell me, like, you don't know until you have your own kids. I knew. Because I have my own now. Mm-hmm. The thing that broke me, that I cried for months in my sleep. I would wake up with tears. Isabel. And my uncle wasn't the only person who could hear me. Isabel. She came up to me and she was leaving. She was sad. She'd never been away from me for that long. And so she, goes and she gives me a hug, and I'm like holding her, and I must have held her a little too tight. Because this little girl, she said, Nita, when are you coming back? And I didn't have an answer. And I took too long, so she asked again, Nita, you're coming back, right? And the only thing I could think to say, I was trying so hard not to cry, the only thing I could think to say was, ask your mother. And she bawled. Because she knew her mama didn't like me. And so I held her. I caved a little bit. That parenting on my part. And I cried in front of her, and I held her, and I told her that I loved her and to be a good girl and to watch out for her brother and sister like how I had watched out for them. And then the other kids started crying. And then my aunt yanked her away from my arms. She yanked my babies from my arms. And it would be a very long time before I would see them again. I cried. I sobbed for months. It was my uncle, within, when he came back from work and he realized that I wasn't there anymore and my aunt had done, he had called me over and over and over again on my iPad. And my grandmother, she saw that he was He was calling me and she goes, don't answer. You've done enough. My soul was so broken. I just didn't want to cause the kids any more pain. I truly thought that their lives would be better if I stopped causing so much havoc in it. Because once again, I thought it was my fault. So my grandmother really not doing anything, I had to take the reins. I ended up finding all of us a 4-bedroom apartment for a little more than what she was paying for her 1-bedroom. It was in a nicer area, not like super nice, because I mean it was Orlando. I got a job working at Universal Studios. I got to open Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, which was amazing. I was literally there opening day. I was on Fox News. I rang the bell, sent out the pygmy puffs, and I was making the best of my situation. Then came one day, my second favorite aunt, which is my mother's aunt, my aunt's aunt, my grandfather's sister. She comes in. She's like, hey, talk to you. I was like, of course, yeah, you know. And so I figured she's gonna talk to me about the grandpa situation, you know, going on with that. So we go off in a complete opposite direction of the community, you know, the apartment complex. Go to the other side. I don't know why she needed to go so far. And we end up sitting down. Like, if you told me to come back, I'd be like, I don't know where I'm going. Like, it was how far she took us. And she ends up like sitting down. I sit down next to her, pulls out her phone. She starts recording. I'm like, okay. And like consent to this, but like whatever, you know. And she begins to ask me, so did your uncle ever touch you inappropriately? No. Did you and your uncle ever have an inappropriate relationship? No. Did your uncle ever make you feel uncomfortable? No. And she would rephrase it. She would rephrase it for another 13 times, Tracy. And it was to a point where I literally cut her off and I said, no. You're going to ask me again and again, and my answer is no. He was my father figure. He was the only person that stood up for me for the grandpa situation. And as soon as I said grandpa, she stopped that recording. Getting strange, right? So she pauses for a moment. She starts it again. And she goes, okay, because I found these messages on your phone. Remember when my aunt took my phone? She took screenshots. She literally took like a picture of the phone of these different messages between me and Uncle David. One was about steak, and the other one was about my car, which was a Grand Jeep Cherokee 2001. I thought it was a very redneck car, so I gave it a redneck name. I named it Venison. Venny for short, right? And one day, you know, it was in the parking, you know, like in the actual driveway. And typically when my aunt and my uncle come home, they like to be in the driveway and they liked Venny to be on the side, right, in the front. And so I only had my permit at the time, but Uncle David was pretty cool. So I had sent a text to Uncle David that said, hey, can I pull Venny out of the driveway? And he said, I would wait. I would prefer if you waited until I got home. That was one. The other one was a conversation about steak because I was, once again, at Lexi's house, very popular place to be. And they had like a giant like steak along with a cake. They were very bougie. And so they like, you know, cut like the slices of it. And I was like, oh my gosh, Uncle David would like this. So I sent him like a picture of the steak. And he was like, oh my gosh, why do you make me suffer? You know, and like a laughing face. So these two messages, right? She pulls them up and she shows them to me and she goes, you know, I showed these to some of my coworkers and they also think that it's very sexual. they're grasping at non-existent straws. I'm like, what friends do you have? She works in the education system. I'm like, what friends do you have? And I was like, well, no, that conversation was about steak. And if you scrolled up, if you had the ability to scroll up, you would see a picture of a steak. And Benny had explained the whole entire situation about the name of my car. Okay. She looked at me like I was sketch. And then she stopped that recording once more. And then she looked at me and she asked, so what was the situation with Grandpa? I explained everything in vivid detail. And then she goes, okay, but did he penetrate though? And I said, no. He didn't take his clothes off. He made me take off mine though. She goes, well, that isn't rape. My grandmother adds to this trauma, right? My grandmother divorced my grandfather a very long time ago. And the truth comes out as we were yelling back and forth. My mom ends up finding out the truth, all right? Because one day I just had enough. And my mom's like, what? Uncle David? And I was like, why does everyone think this is an Uncle David situation? Because I got mad about the whole my other aunt coming and confronting me about stuff that didn't happen. And so I ended up just like, I can't deal with anybody. My aunt knew that she was in the wrong, the one that was questioning me, because later that day I had to go to work. I had to go to Universal. And she was like, hey, can I give you a ride? You know, like, it's totally fine. And I was like, no, I'm fine. Thank you. Like, taking a shower. I'm good. She knew I was upset. And she goes, okay, well, I love you. And I was like, hey, be safe, you know? Because I just wanted her to leave me alone. And I wanted her to think I was disrespectful, but I also wanted her to just get out of my space. So you know what she does? She literally breaks into the bathroom to open as I'm showering. She breaks in and she's like, hey, okay, you know, like, it wasn't to upset you, and da-da-da-da. And she's like backtracking because she realizes that she's an awful piece of garbage too. Right? And I wasn't going to let her get out of it by making her feel justified or feel better because I forgave her. So I was like, no. I was like, okay, bye. So she ends up leaving. She closes the door, and that's the last time I talked to her. And the situation with my grandmother ended up getting worse. The truth comes out, and my grandmother was like, why didn't you tell me? I would have believed you. And I was like, okay, whatever, like, that's gonna help me now. Whatever. And my mother apparently just went over her head that Grandpa had done things to me, and she somehow translated that as Uncle David. And she was like, what? And I was like, no, Ma, that's the whole point, is that he didn't do anything. But Grandpa did. Catch up. Like, my mom just was not there, and it frustrated me so badly how slow her mental capacity was. And, you know, because I needed her to be a mom. I needed her to defend me. I wanted somebody on my side, and I no longer had that. Uncle David was gone. And my grandmother, she would say these things. She would say things to be nice, and then she would expect things of me. I was trying to save up. I was still underage when, you know, I went to go live with her. I was 17, going to turn 18 soon. But I was a minor when I first started. Universal was technically my first job. I got paid like $9 and like 25 cents an hour. And I was really trying to save up for a MacBook because I really, really wanted one. My best friend Lexi had one, and I wanted one. I felt that I had deserved it after everything that I had been through. So I was saving up for it. And I knew how to save up. My grandmother, however, felt that because I made money, it did not matter that I went to school full time, and that I needed school supplies, because I needed to pay rent as a 17-year-old. And by like rent, I mean give her all of my money. It got to a point where she would come home with like new shorts, her nails done, her hair did, and I had recycled her clothes. I was wearing my grandmother's hand-me-downs. I still have a couple of her hand-me-down clothes because I'm so frugal. I almost wore it today too. But it got, she wanted me to cook, to clean, to do all the stuff. She heard of all the things I did for my aunt. that made her life a wonderful, majestical wonderland. And she was upset that she wasn't getting the same treatment, even though there were no kids involved. And I went, no, I'm not doing that. She goes, you know what? I should draw up a contract, okay? Because if you're going to live here, then you need to pay bills. And so one day, after I met this cute guy, I got to know his family, and his family loved me. His family learned about my trials. They felt like really bad, and they were like, listen, if you need a safe place to, like, you can come be with us, okay? Like, it's okay. Was it a dumb decision? Yes. Would I take it back? No. All right, because what I did was I made my sassiest exit out of this family that I was inevitably going to be a pariah of. Just like my mom, I was like, you don't want me? Fine, then I don't want you. And so what I did was I drew up that contract just like my grandmother wanted. And I said, dear, insert grandma name, I will cook you dinner every night. I will give you every single cent of my paycheck, tax-free. I will make sure that everything in your house is spotless, so long as I live under your roof. Signed, me. I left it on that table, and I made a sassy exit. So I went to go live with my boyfriend. At this point, I was 18 years old. I left. The only thing that really hurt me was because I was talking to my sister. My sister and I had reconnected. We became really close at this time when I came back, and we both met up again in Orlando.
And you knew about the grandpa and her at this time, right?
Yeah, she ended up, that's when I found out. That's when I found out about it. And the fact that she also told my aunt that I had lived with. And the fact that she did nothing. You know? So when two girls had told her about it. So the only thing that really hurt me when I left was the fact that I had to leave behind my sister. She literally begged me not to go. I left her a message on her iPad saying, you know, that I loved her, but that I couldn't do it. And so for the first time I put myself first. And then I ended up going to my boyfriend at the time's home. I would be in that relationship for a very long time. His family loved me. To this day, there is not a family that I am closer to. Like, they loved me. I would scrapbook with his mom, okay? Like, I would full on hang out with his mom just because I loved his mom, you know? His sister, to this day, is one of my best friends, okay? Like, that is the kind of relationship I have maintained, even though me and this person no longer speak. It was very hurtful. That relationship, we did end up getting engaged. I did gain weight. He ended up cheating on me at the Olive Garden that he told me he loved me and then proposed to me at, like with a coworker at the same Olive Garden, because he eventually worked there. Cheated on me. And just was blatant about it, would flirt with other people. And it really just made me feel like I had no value, and it just sort of reiterated everything that I had gone through. It was one of the most traumatizing relationships. It didn't make sense to me how you could watch someone suffer and continue to do the things that you did. And when he moved on, he was like, "Oh, well, that's it. Sucks to be you, though. You know, like that was it. Like I was nothing. He just dropped me just like that. Nothing to him." And, you know, his family that had been so close to me, you know, like they kind of took my side. Like the sister 100% took my side. She was like, no, absolutely not. He's garbage. He's pathetic. He's awful. But then she still played D&D games with him. So I didn't understand that. But his mom was like, oh yeah, you know, but me and my husband, we're not going to get involved in his relationships. And I'm like, okay. You were, though. You loved me, you involved me, you know. And that entire situation, I ended up going to live with my best friend Courtney, who has also been present since the Lexi era. She just, you know, this was her main I went to go be with her for a week to essentially give me and this guy space, and I was hoping, like, I'm gonna get back, he's gonna get over this, and we're gonna get back together and everything's gonna be fine, and I was like, think good thoughts, everything's fine, you can't think negative. I was like, like, so much hung in the balance. Like, my best friend knew it wasn't gonna happen, and she was like, listen, no matter what, you can come and be with me, because there was no way in anything, no way in the inferno that I was going to return to my mother, like, right, after making that sassy exit several years ago. Like, there was no way. So I'm, like 21 at this point, and I'm in Boca, hanging with Courtney. I return. He's like, no. I end up getting my things. I go to Boca. I start to get my life together. I end up I enter a relationship that I knew wasn't going to work out. It was just sort of something to distract me from the utter pain that I had, because when that breakup happened after being with him for so long, I truly believed that we were going to be together forever. He was the person I had lost my virginity to after living with him for like 3 months, which was also not a pleasant experience, losing it, because I did say no and to stop, and he did not. So that
Okay,
was
hold on. So the guy that you had the rebound relationship with, you thought you would be with him forever?
No. I'm talking about the first guy.
Oh, okay.
First guy, lost my virginity to him after a couple of months of living with him. I truly thought I was going to marry him. I was the kind of person, I'm going to save myself for marriage. I truly thought that was him. I was an 18-year-old, and when it was first happening, I obviously it hurt. I didn't realize how badly it was going to hurt, and I told him to stop, and he said, "Shh, it's almost over." Literally what he said was, "Shh, it's almost over," and I just had to buck it up, buttercup, and I literally cried after, and he was confused as to why I was crying. Such an indicator of how that relationship was going to go, and I just did not see the signs.
Right.
And so at the end of that relationship, I was bawling, because I didn't just lose him. I lost his family, which was now my family. I had lost them as well. It hurt so badly. I mean, even his family would let my brother and my sister come visit, because we still lived in Orlando. So they would let my brother and my sister come visit. My mom would like take them from me early to be vindictive. And then she was like, if you don't hand them over, I'm going to call the police. And I was like, you're going to call the police on me? I was like, I just wanted to take them to Dave and Buster's. I was working. Like, why are you calling the police? Like, I'm not holding them hostage. You can come get them. Like, what are you talking about? But even my uncle, the original one, the one who would beat us very badly with belts, that one, the Odie situation, he ended up coming back into that, and he goes, you need to give them back, or I'm going to make sure that your mom calls the police, and I'm going to make sure you get arrested. He goes, you don't want them turning out like you. And I was like, turning out like me? What are you talking about? And he goes, you know what I mean. You're, like, you aren't in college, like, you have a deadbeat job. I was like, first of all, I am in college. He goes, oh, you are? And I go, yeah. And he goes, oh, I didn't know that. And I was like, because you never talk to me. You just automatically assume what people tell you. I swear, they're like so dumb. Like, they're so dumb and willfully ignorant. So I ended up having to cut off the entirety of that, my mother's side of the family, with the exception of my mother. They gave her a pass, and over time, me and my mother built that relationship back up again. Back to the boy. I was distraught. He was truly my life, my everything. I thought I was going to like have his kids. His family meant so much to me. We would have family game nights. Like, we would eat dinner as a family. Like, when the mom would go to like the grocery store, I would go with her. We would scrapbook together. We would go to the parks together. We would go to Universal, Disney together. We did everything as a family. Like, me and his sister had a very cringy YouTube channel. and we were kind of successful. Okay, it was a whole deal, and I lost all of it, and I was bawling. I was crying like all over again. I was like re-traumatized with the whole kid situation because I lost them. I lost this guy. I lost his family, and I'm just bawling. My best friend's at work. You know, she's trying to be a social worker, and you know, she at the time she had left out like some anxiety medication because she did have anxiety. She was a college student trying to work, trying to do all these things simultaneously. So she had anxiety medication. She made the mistake of leaving it out, and there was just like a lot of pills. And so that was the second time that I ever contemplated committing suicide, and it was so awful. But I remember like looking at it, and I remember like also looking at like my laptop, which I still have today. It's the same laptop, high laptop. Um, but I was watching a YouTuber, Jacksepticeye, and him and PewDiePie saved my life because if I wasn't able to laugh, like I just have this miraculous thing to be able to laugh through a situation. Because if you don't laugh, you die. And so I ended up, you know, like taking her pills. They were in my hand at one point, but then I put them back, and I was like, okay, we're not doing that. I ended up putting it in her room. I did not attempt that, but I did warn her not to leave them out again. I did end up going to see like a psychologist because obviously this was not a great situation. And they tried to put me on several medications simultaneously. And I didn't even talk to the guy for 15 minutes. He was trying to put me on 4 different medications. And one of them was for hallucinations that I did not have. And I was like, who are you? And I was like, no, because I saw what medications did to my mother. And I was like, no, I'm not. No, we're not doing that. We're going to find some alternative way out of this. So I had this rebound guy. It was my first introduction to weed. I smoked. Did I even smoke? Oh, I didn't even smoke with him until long after. So really, he had a metal band, and I would just, you know, sit there and entertain myself. I worked for a Chinese place in the Boca Mall, and I was just sort of trudging through life until one day, you know, I got prettier, and the dude who had cheated on me, the first guy, ended up hitting me up again. And the guy I was with was a child. Like he would throw his controller. And I remember one day, like I told him, I was like, you ever try and get loud with me? Like, you stand no chance. I'm like, I'm a Latina. You stand no chance. You throw a controller and I will walk out of here and I will never, like, I will not look back. He tested me and he threw his controller and I was like, okay, bye. And then that first guy was hitting me up and I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to break this off anyway. This isn't going anywhere. I knew it was going to go anywhere. And so I ended up breaking up with that dude, and then I ended up returning to the first guy. And we were relatively happy for another year until he once again decided that he got bored. And so I felt like an idiot.
So hold on. The guy that you got back together again that had cheated on you, that's not the guy with the family, is it?
That is the guy with the family.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I got to move back, right? And this time I got to hear stories of his ex, right? And he ends up he could never hold down like a job. Um and so I got to hear of all of that, and even the best friend was like, listen, I don't think this is a good idea, but I did not listen. Even my other best friend that I had lived with, Courtney, she was like, I don't think this is a good idea, but I didn't listen. I had a good job in Boca at that point. I had moved on from that Chinese place in the mall, and I actually became an office manager. That was a good title and good responsibilities. I had a good thing going, but I just really wanted my family back. And so I went back and I got my best friend back and I got his mom back, and we got like a good year of fun and happy until once again he decided he got bored. And this time he not only got bored, he got daring this time because while we were,
what?
he got daring this time because he ended up I ended up like going away for a couple of days, and he brought that woman home when I wasn't there, when his parents and his sister were home. Like, he broke up with me and then immediately brought her over when we all still lived with each other. Like, my stuff was literally still in his room because we had been intimate like the day prior. Like, and then he brought her home, and then my best friend, being a good best friend, she was like, she's here. My boots were literally scattered on the floor. Okay? Like my jacket was still on the bed that she was laying on.
So his sister called and told you.
Yeah. And so I was driving back, right? And I remember sitting at this red light, and something snapped. I was sitting at this red light, and I went, F this red light. I'd rather go to jail. And so I was sitting at a red light. I was like, nope. Cars were like cars were about to start coming, but I was like, I'm not doing this. I literally screamed like a guttural primal scream, like, no! And so I went, and I floored it, and I skipped that red light. I was like, forget this red light. I'm not doing this. And I drifted the freaking car. I think I'm not being dramatic. Like, that's literally what happened. I drifted that car, and I made sure I drove all the way back to that house that I helped paint. Okay. And I went up there, and I saw the messages, like I had messages and evidence that me, and him were literally just together. And he was like, oh, I'm not done, like, that's not what you think it is. Like, no, there's not another person, da-da-da-da-da. In case this girl thought, in case she was actually of innocent mind, thinking like, oh, they're over or whatever. But I wasn't fully thinking it through because my stuff was still in the room. And so I pull up and everything, and then he gets scared. He's like, oh, snap, he did not expect me to be home. And he did not like the fact that I became confrontational. He got his confrontation from his dad. And she dated a Latino, what can I tell you? And so I end up banging on that door. He opens it. The girl's like, like, oh my God. And I'm like, read the phone. And I toss my phone in the door. He literally tries to shut the door on my arm to keep me from going in. That is how badly he didn't want me to ruin this hookup for him. And I'm literally staring at my boots on the floor. Okay, like my camera, my Polaroid camera, was literally like sitting on like these drawers, like these plastic drawers, okay, that I bought. And I'm just like, what kind of sense does this woman have? And then it hit me after a while that she was garbage because she knew, and she just didn't care. And so I remember, I was like, what am I gonna do? Like, when am I gonna go? And then his mother was like, you don't have to go anywhere. You can stay here. Okay, like, you can have that other room. It's totally fine. Like, no one's in that room. And I was like, oh, I can have the other room, huh? And just listen as they plow it out when we broke up a week ago. And that's what I did, Tracy. And then we had to share this bathroom, right? Share this bathroom. Like, and I shut myself in that room. I didn't come out. I felt like such a loser because I couldn't go out and face the person that I had just made myself to be a complete and total ass because I threw that phone. Really, she was the one in the wrong, but I was the one who felt like the bad guy. And I remember going into the bathroom, and I found like bloody condoms in the bathroom because it was like red, plasticky sort of situation. And I asked his mom first because she's a hairstylist, and so I was like, hey, did you like dye your hair or something recently? He was, no, why? And I went, okay, because I know you didn't want them having sex in your house, and they sort of used the bathroom that I use, and they just sort of just left bloody condoms in the thing uncovered. So she was sort of trying, I guess she was trying to go for I mean, they were adults, they could do whatever they wanted. But she was trying to go for a sort of you're not going to treat my friend, Anita, like your ex, my friend, like garbage. You're not going to, like, if you're going to go and do your stuff, but you're not doing it in my house. So I'm not, doing that disrespect. But again, they were non-confrontational. They just let it happen. They would say something, then just let it happen. And so I told her about what I found in the bathroom, and she goes, "Oh my gosh!" Eventually, I told her, "Hey, you need to be careful, because I honestly have like this gut feeling that she's gonna get pregnant." Because I confronted him, and I was like, "Hey, you left like these bloody condoms." I like knock on the door, still have my stuff in it, because he wouldn't give it back.
I didn't hear what?
Because he wouldn't give it back. Like, he literally still had stuff. Like, she was staring at my stuff. Like, and so, I like knocked on his door, and I was like, "Hey, you left these condoms in like the bathroom. Like, that's like it's like really embarrassing for you. So, like, yeah, like clean it up, because I think mom saw it." I told her, but like I was like, "I think your mom saw it." And he was like, "Yeah, no, that's not mine." And I was like, I knew it wasn't my best friend and her boyfriend, who also lived with us, because they did not use that. They were actively trying to get pregnant because she had endometriosis. She had a very short time to get pregnant.
Mhm.
So I was like, or I don't know what that is, but yeah, clean up your stuff, because I know it's you. Stop lying. He also this is gross, TMI, but he used my razor, when we were no longer, like, I don't care if we were together or not, but he used my razor to shave his private area, and just left it like that. He didn't even bother to like rinse out or anything. Just, it was so disgusting. It was just so disgusting. I'm like looking back, and I'm like, "Oh, what did you see? Oh my gosh, the rose-colored glasses were real."
Right.
They were real crazy. But I end up eventually moving on with a guy who was way more attractive than he was. And he was a Pisces, so bunny rabbits. That's all I got to say. And he was a very, sensitive person. Although there were some things, he was atheist, and I was very, very Christian. And so we clashed in that sort of way. We sort of banged heads a lot. Like, there was just like people who were just so, like, they fit together, but there was like this one like bump in the road that just sort of veered everything off in like weird directions. And that was sort of like our relationship. It was not very long lived. I was also not in a place to be dating. I wanted to be, but I was not. I just didn't want to feel the pain. And then that person I ended up exploring a bit of my sexuality with, and he ended up abusing that opportunity. And even when I told him no, he did not stop. He continued. I had to physically put my hand between myself and him and pull myself away, because I was like, "No." And that was traumatizing when I brought up the fact that he had actually done that. He was like, "No, no, no, that's not what that was. No, that's not what that was. You are not allowed to twist this around on me." And I was like, "But that's what happened. First you told me that you loved me, and then you did that, and then you were like, I never said that to you. And then I told you no, stop. You did not stop. That is the definition of that. Like, that's the definition of rape. Like, how else do I put that? And it was just so mind-boggling. I remember that day, because we had already broken up. We were just sort of trying to like maintain a friendship, but it was not going to maintain a friendship. We had too much of a like a connection, so much of a draw to each other. But I remember that day, like, I know, like, at the time, I would say, like, oh, God didn't want me to do it because this happened. I remember I literally felt like as if pin needles were all over my entire body. Like, as if, like, I had been stabbed with needles everywhere on my body. I felt like I was on fire, you know, and like, I was supposed to go over to this guy's house, right? Pokemon Go was still a thing, and we were gonna go do that. And so I would, like, I wanted to go, you know, like, so badly to just see him. I just wanted to see him, to be around him, because I really did care about him. And this sensation was happening, and then I had like this gut instinct, like something terrible was going to happen, like I was going to get hit by a car on the way, or, you know, like some catastrophic event was going to happen in my absence to Courtney, who I had lived with again. And, you know, like, all, like, just like every sensation that I have was like, no, no. But did I listen, Tracy? No, I didn't. I did not listen. Okay, I still went over there. That situation happened to me, and then I understood at that point why God did not want me to go. And I understand it was my spirit guide that did not want me to go. And so I come back. It was very traumatic. My best friend said, hey, do you want to do a rape kit? I said, no, I just don't ever want to talk to him ever again. And I didn't. I ended up blocking him on everything, even though I still cared about him. I was like, this isn't a healthy situation. I'm not going to do this. Several months go by. I end up returning to the original job that I had, which was the office manager position. So I was building up from there. I end up reconnecting with my my now fiance, my then, you know, best friend. And like that, several months later, we end up reconnecting. He comes down to visit me. He goes, you know what? I'm going to buy a ticket. I'm going to come see you. He does. And then the very day that he's there, he's like, hey, you've been my best friend for a very long time, and I want you to continue to be my best friend for the rest of my life. So will you marry me? And he was shaking, and I was shaking, and I just like stared down at the ring that I did not expect. And I said yes, because there was nothing in my head that was like, don't do it. So I was like, I'm gonna do it. And so I did. And now we have a son. So he ended up coming to live with us in Fort Lauderdale. At that time, I was living with my best friend Courtney, the social worker. She had 2 cats. I ended up getting my own cat. I wanted to return to Orlando because I just really had this like thing for Orlando. Like, I just really wanted to go back. I wanted to work for the parks again. I didn't end up working for the parks, but I did return. And within a month, I discovered that I was pregnant. Ooh, I was riding real high until I got pregnant, because then it hit me like a truck. All the depression, the anxiety, all the things that had been built up for like the past, I think at that point, like the past 23 years of my life hit me all at one time. I started to become very like speculative, and then I ended up sort of enclosing myself. We ended up moving to New York City, the Bronx, to be with my fiance's family. Wonderful people, not a great place where they lived. And we were there up until recently. But while we were there, I discovered, I really delved more into the spiritual side of religion, and not just like the rules and regulations, the giant Bible. And so I looked at different things, like what are spirit guides, and like these sort of things kept happening that seemed just like magical to me, that just didn't make sense, that I couldn't wrap my head around. And being inside for that long, you had plenty of time to think. And I thought, and so eventually I bought a tarot deck, and I started to get a lot of answers, and I was like, this is making a lot of sense. And after having my son, I had postpartum like depression, things like that.
So what year was your son born?
2020. He was born March 14th. So
Oh, he's a COVID baby. total, not a COVID baby because you didn't get pregnant with him during
I
COVID, but
actually, all the babies were being born at that time. I had scheduled, I scheduled my like my birthing process. It was like 39 weeks, but you were allowed to do that, and I was so done being pregnant. I was so depressed, like my back hurt so badly, like I was throwing up all the time. I could not eat. I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. Like eviction. You're done. I love you, all right, but you need to come out of mommy, all right? I'm not doing this. So he was born wonderful and healthy, and it was great. I was sad that he was born in the Bronx, but at least my fiance was able to be in the room with me, because shortly after they stopped that, like it was literally that weekend, I think, that they started enforcing like the what is it called? Like the shutdowns, like the everyone's the quarantine. That's the word I'm looking for. They had to they started doing the quarantines like right after I gave birth, so I was very fortunate.
yeah, you got really lucky.
Yeah, I did,
Yeah.
and I forced it. But postpartum depression.
We're gonna pause. We're gonna pause for 1 second. Hold on. I'm gonna stop the recording for 1 second. Okay, so we're back after a quick break. All right. So we left off, and you said, oh, that the weekend after your son was born, that's when they started with the COVID shutdowns.
Yes, and after the COVID shutdown, I had terrible postpartum depression and anxiety. Postpartum anxiety was a very real thing for me. It took a very long time for me to get over that. And one of the things that just superbly helped was when I finally downloaded a dumb little app called TikTok.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, it's just you got so much funny content with it just back to back, and it just made you feel a little bit better.
Yeah, and humor is a big thing for you.
And I'm sorry, say that again?
Humor is a big thing for you. You
Yeah,
said if you don't laugh, you die. I wrote that down. You said
yeah, if you don't laugh, you die. So the thing about TikTok was, for whatever reason, the algorithm was like, hey, this video was meant to find you. And I do not believe that every single one of those videos was meant to find me. But some of them just really resonated in a way that didn't make sense. And some videos that were not, particularly like targeted at me, not that I liked, I didn't, say these videos, I didn't do anything with these videos, but more and more and more of them came up. And some of them started to make a lot of sense and answered questions that made more sense to me, because during this time of quarantine, all you had time to do was reflect on your life. And I was thinking about everything that I had gone through, and I was like, why would a God that loves me so very much, who sent his son to die upon a cross for me, put me through this situation? Like, why would he place me with parents that just could not take care of me? Why would he let my grandfather sexually assault me and my sister? Why would he let these people beat us? Why would he let me feel so unheard and unwanted? But then I got an answer that was, God didn't do it. You did, because you're evolving and you need to learn in order to evolve your soul, in order to ascend. By healing yourself, you heal the collective, things get better. It makes more sense to me that I would choose this than a God would damn me if I had no prior life, if I had no prior connection to earth, if I was born, like I don't believe that babies are born, I did not believe that babies are born with like sin, Now I believe that they're born with other lives, and that now they're having a karmic response in this current life, and they're trying to learn, and they're trying to evolve, and they're trying to get better, just as everyone else is. It makes a lot more sense that I would be paying for something I did in the past in a different life than to just have been dealt this automatically. Because I'm like, listen, the Kardashians are living the high life, okay? And I'm over here with postpartum depression, all right? I got a gut that won't go away. This ain't fair. And so this makes sense. This makes sense to me.
Right, right. And it's all a journey. And like I said before we came on the recording, I think it's just so awesome that you're as young as you are and you just got to be exposed to spirituality. I mean, I was a Christian for years, just really, really in the church. I mean, charismatic Christian, so it wasn't like Catholic or, I mean, I grew younger, I was Catholic, but you know what I mean? Like I had exposure to faith and healing and things like that, which I'm truly ever grateful for. And the scriptural Bible past that I have and everything that my guides will pull up scriptures every once in a while and relate them to my life. And I'm like, oh, that one's still relevant, isn't it? And it's just kind of fun to see that. But
Right.
to have been exposed the way you are to
And it,
spirituality and healing and find yourself, like
right.
emotional healing and things like that, that I only cried for my whole life is amazing that you get that.
Right. No, and I'm so grateful because the moment that I discovered spirituality, there was a period of time where I was like, oh my gosh, should I be doing this? I'm so afraid. I was so afraid of the God that I had praised my entire life that apparently had never blinked in my direction because I was so afraid of being smited. Well, I was already smoked. Okay. And the second that I stepped in, I thought that I was just going to get hit by lightning, you know, like, how dare you, witchcraft. Like, that's what I thought was going to happen. Voldemort was going to descend upon me and consume my soul. That's what I thought. But then I settled and I was like, wait, everything is making sense now. Okay. And when everything began to make sense, I started to experience a spiritual awakening because I was now beginning to pay attention to the dreams that I had, to the sensations in my body. I was now able to observe the world through eyes that were not so barred down by religion. Like, I so 100% believe in God, and I believe that Jesus is a real thing. Jesus is a real thing. I just don't think that the Bible did an accurate job of portraying him. I don't think the Bible is the hard end all be all. I think there are good messages, and I also think there are bad messages just in every text that every human has ever touched. Because when we tell a story, we tell it from one perspective, and there are millions upon millions of perspectives. So I take good messages and I take what resonates with me because good and bad, they don't exist, just our perspective of it. So, what you can say is something low vibrational, something high vibrational. Good and bad can differentiate, but love is universal. And that is what I follow. And that is what I believe in. And I believe that this, practice, what you're doing, comes from a place of love. And I want to embrace that because I have lived with fear my entire life. And I'm not going to run from her anymore. I'm going to give her what she wants.
And when you say her, who do you mean when you say her?
Her is the personification of fear, the fearful me, the wickedness that I'd always run from, the thing that I had inherited but I never touched, like the wicked part of me, the fearful part of me. Because when you're afraid, you fight or you flight, and I have flighted my whole life. I have like this darkness, and it exists because she never got love.
Right.
So I'm going to turn around.
Your shadow self. That was what a lot of people would call it.
So hug my shadow self. Love, because she deserves it. She got me through a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And we put that shadow self in this is the image I got when I released my shadow self. I put her in a box, all the trauma and the sad things and the things that made me feel rejected and unloved and unworthy. And excuse me, and I put her in a box. I saw her in a box and I kept shoving all this black energy and dark energy and the things I didn't want in order to be able to function in the world, right? Because you still have to function in this world.
Right.
You still have to go to a job. You still want to make money. You still want to have a family. You want to be successful and all those things. So we have to hide those other things, right? If we don't heal them and know how to heal them and deal with them. And so I was like shoving him in a box, and then I'd shut the box, and then I'd open it and shove a little bit more in. So when I finally let her out, it was like she was just in this box, in this dark box, just covered with all this yuck. Right. She was covered with all this black yuck. And so, yeah, finding her and letting her out and having her hang with me and heal her was life changing. I actually was going to kill myself. And I told my guides, you have one more chance. Otherwise, I'm checking out. And I had my date and my time and how I was going to do it and everything planned. So, yeah, they introduced me to my shadow self, and that's why I'm still here today. So it's pretty powerful to get in touch with your shadow self. Okay. Say it again.
I was just going to say a particular dream that I feel like might be relevant.
Okay.
That I had, and it involves quite a few like characters that I have mentioned.
Okay.
So in this dream, I had driven over to one of my ex's houses. It was the Pisces who ended up, raping me. I had to put distance between me and him. Literally, the spirit guides were like, "No, that one." So I ended up going back to his house, and apparently, like this was after I had been with spirituality for, a bit. I'd studied it, been getting closer with it. So I had this dream that I go over to his house, and I'm like, you know what? I want to talk it out. I want to, do like a forgive. I just want to air out this thing because I felt like I needed to with this person. And so I ended up pulling up with my friends, two of which are here, who live here. And my fiance, I believe, also came with. And for whatever reason, we drove in my best friend's car, Courtney, who I had lived with, drove in her car to come here. So we're there and we begin chatting for a little bit. And then I decide that I need to go to the bathroom. I go to the bathroom, like cleaning up and everything. And then I catch myself in the mirror, right? I'm like examining myself, but all of a sudden my reflection does not do what I do. Because as I begin to move, my reflection decides to go. And that was terrifying. Okay. I probably pooped my pants in the dream. Okay. And this thing crawled out of the mirror to try and get me. And my first response was to scream and run. So I run out to the living room. I'm like, you, let's go, running. And so we're running. We're on the lawn. We're getting to the car. And this thing is a monstrosity. Its appendages begin to stretch out into this sort of like Slenderman kind of deal. And it begins to crawl over in my direction. And it's like, you can't escape me. Like I want to get the wording right. It goes, you can't escape me. We were warriors together. You can't leave me. And I was like, warriors. I'm like, I don't know you, sis. And I'm like, I'm running to this car, and I get in, and I slam this door shut, okay? And it's grabbing onto the door, and the person driving is like, oh my God. He's like, he's freaking out. And I'm like, just drive. And then he floors it, and this thing literally clawing onto the door to get to me ends up, as we drive away, it peels this door off. It did not care for anybody else there. It wanted me. And the words it said was, you can't leave me. We were warriors together. I am part of you. And I didn't know what that was. I legitimately thought, I was like, this is a demon. I was like, this is something, like, oh my gosh, this is something awful. And I had to like really sit with myself, and TikTok did its thing. And eventually I came across the term shadow self. Okay. I came across the words shadow work. All right. And lower self. And so I was like, oh, I get it now. The reason why it looked so wicked to me is because I never wanted to look at it. And now I saw it. Once it knew that I could see it, it was like, hey, let's have a conversation. But I'm seeing this horrible monstrosity, and this thing is feeling abandoned. I remember trying to lucid dream back into there to fix it, because what I wanted to do was face this this, you know, entity and essentially give it a hug. But I was like, what if it's not my lower self? And so that's where we come into a lot of self-doubt. And what I'm hoping that today will reveal is
Got
if
it.
the intuition is correct and a general direction of where I should go from here.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's yeah,
Wow.
I think we're caught up.
So, you've had quite a life, and you make other people's trauma, like mine, seem like, wow, I've had a really hard time in my life, and I've had some traumatic things happen to me. But like I said, before we came on the recording, everyone's trauma's got a different flavor, a different shape, and a different color. But then you go, wow, was mine really trauma? Did I miscategorize mine? Like, maybe mine wasn't really trauma. I don't know. After listening to her story, maybe when I compare, which is, that's an ego thing, comparing. But I obviously had my own karma to work out, right? And you've had your own whatever lessons or karma or whatever agreements, pre-birth agreements, because we choose our parents. It doesn't mean that we always know exactly how our parents are going to act when we're down here. Because, like, for example, you could go with the understanding that, oh, you're going to have a supportive, loving mother. And you get down here and your mom's not the supporting, loving mother. And apparently she got whacked, along the line. It was an ancestral thing that just kept whacking everyone down the line. And she wasn't able, like she thought she was going to be able to be the one to heal the generational trauma and the pattern. And she wasn't strong enough to do that. And so she didn't. And so then your mother got whacked. And so she wasn't the loving, supportive, caring, nurturing mother that she was supposed to. I'm not saying this is your situation. This is just an example that she was supposed to be, right? So even the best laid plans can go awry, So we think life's going to be one way and we agree to come down, and that's actually very different.
Right.
But,
that's why it makes a lot more sense to me that I chose the parents, that I incited this, that I wasn't put here, like I chose it.
Yeah. No, it's really clear from many, many psychics. And like I said, I named him at the beginning, Robert Schwartz. His books, if you listen to both of his books, I say listen because I do the Audible version, but listen or read both of his books. It's really clear. And other people who do life in between life planning and they look at pre-birth planning sessions, that we definitely all pick our own parents. But like I said, it doesn't mean that, exactly how we think our parents are going to be, that's how they are, because that's not true. And I was actually just reminded of an example the other day. I had a session with a woman who was a walk-in soul. And so she wasn't the original soul in that body. And that's going to actually get. I'm sorry?
I feel that.
We can ask. It sounds like you have a lot of memories from your entire life, though. So I'm not sure if you'd be a walk-in. But we can ask. We can definitely ask. She had zero memory, and I won't be surprised if you still have full memories and you're a walk-in, because nothing surprises me sitting in this chair anymore. Right. My magic adventure chair. Guess I'll call it, right? I get to hear all these adventures on this side of the chair. But no, so and this is going to be on my YouTube channel also, her story. She didn't have any memories of her childhood, like below the age of 7. And I didn't mention anything in the intake about being a walk-in. I didn't want to taint it. I didn't even know if she knew what a walk-in was. I just kind of made a mental note. And it turns out her higher self told me that it wasn't the original soul and whatever. So yeah, she was a walk-in. So in that instance, source basically plucked her out of wherever she was and plopped her in that family, and she didn't pick her parents. But from what I understand, unless I'm told differently under hypnosis, we do choose our parents. But again, it doesn't mean that they are the parents we thought they were going to be. So you may have chosen your parents with all of their challenges and all of that came with it. Or you may have thought you were getting completely different parents and they turned out to be different. And then you lived with the consequences. Basically had to flounder along. So, okay, so I got all your notes here. So I want to go to your questions because we are running out of time for the intake portion. So let me go to the questions. And I have your long list of questions here. I did add that last dream that you had. I added that in there to ask about that. And then you said, what was the entity that they saw when they were lying on?
I was just trying to phrase it in a way that you could ask. I was just trying to make it easier for you. That's all that was.
On this person, A, I'll just call him A's bed. But why did her grandfather assault her and her sister? Was his death a karmic repercussion? Okay. I mean, we all die. So, right? So what did you mean?
In the way that he died, because he died of
Oh, okay. Was the fact that he died of cancer a karmic repercussion? Okay. Have they shared past lives with anyone they know personally in their current life? Oh, meaning you? Have you?
Yes, I was just trying to phrase it in a way that you would ask my higher self under hypnosis. I was looking at it from a Virgo perspective. I should have just been.
I just changed it because has she shared past lives with anyone she knows in her current life, such as her sister Lucy, Courtney, George? Oh, sorry, maybe I shouldn't be saying all these names. I'm sorry.
You're fine. They would have been fine with their names. It's fine.
Okay. Light code activations. Okay, so you have a belief, though. I told you earlier that I wrote down that you said you have a belief you die if you don't laugh. So I want to find out. I mean, do you really believe that? If you don't laugh, you die?
It's more of a life can become very insufferable if you don't laugh at your pain. I think it's more of a philosophical. I don't think it's like an ingrained like, yeah, I haven't laughed today, I'm going to die. Like
I don't mean that, but I'm just saying we want to be really cautious of any beliefs we have, any beliefs, right? Because if we are our higher self doesn't have beliefs. Our like higher self, our spirit self doesn't have beliefs. Like we're outside of beliefs, we're outside of time, we're outside of space. We don't have any perceptions. We don't think anything's good. Don't think it's bad. It just is. Oh, that was an experience. It's just really neutral. Oh, that was an experience. So anytime we have a belief, because there's the two parts of us, right? We have I don't know if you saw this in any of my other videos. There's the persona or the personality, which is Nita, right? That's Nita. She's the personality. You've had all these things that we've just heard about happen to you in your lifetime, and they have shaped you and formed you and molded you into who you are. And they are the things that have given you your belief systems, right? You came to believe that you weren't lovable, that you weren't worthy, that you were, that you couldn't keep a family, maybe things like that, right? And then, like I said, the belief, not to say it's literal, but the belief that if you don't laugh, you die, right? If there's no happiness, there's nothing, right? So any beliefs, that's all I'm saying. What?
Okay. So, there is a belief that I had and might still have. I don't think the laugh one is one. I think that's just sort of like a way. I guess it would technically be a belief, like if you don't laugh, you die. Like if I don't find pleasure in pain in some sort of context, like life could at any point in time become so unbearable that like I might just want to like I'm going in the checkout line, bye.
Right.
But I think it's one of the when we're talking about beliefs, a really big one that I've had my entire life because it was preached to me. It was literally drilled into my brain by my aunt, by everything that I had seen, just really everyone around us. It was you're gonna turn out like your mother. You're gonna turn out like your mother. You're gonna turn out like your mother. I had like this fear. I shouldn't say had. I have like this fear of medication, which I ended up like medication for mental illness, and specifically like I can take an Advil and not cry, but when it comes to like something like Zoloft, like I remember I I braved it one time, trying Zoloft, and it did not work well for me. I felt sick, I felt ill, I felt numb, and I did not like it. And my mom, she ended up like essentially losing her sanity. She sort of seems like half of her soul was taken. And so part of me has this absolute terror. I wouldn't even call it a fear. It's like a horror, like just terror of the unknown, of some demon possessing me, or, of just trying spirituality or trying, medication for mental illness, which is why I have my vape pen. Thank goodness it's legal recreationally here, but I only use it to like relieve like intense anxiety, like depression, things like that, in order to just go to sleep at night, because otherwise I will not. And I will like stay awake, like, oh my gosh, these bad things are around me. I tell myself that I'm protected, but there's just this part of me that always feels like I'm hunted. And so that's a belief system that I have. Like, I always need to be on my guard, that I feel like I'm not protected, and feeling like I'm going to go insane. Like it was meant for me.
Like your mother.
Yeah, like my mother. Because I was told a lot of my life, like, oh, your mother also liked poetry. Your mother liked French class. Your mom loved the theatrics, of drama club. Like, your mother, did tarot cards. Your mother was very spiritual. And my mother also did not mentally keep up. Like, my mother she checked out mentally. She's here in the physicality, but she checked out mentally. She's not the same. And so I don't know if that is a fault of, like, if it was like if this is karma. I don't know if this is because she did something wrong spiritually. I don't know if this is because she, I don't know, sold her soul to a demon.
Well, just FYI, sometimes people decide they want to experience that. It's not always a result of something they've
right. No,
and your mother did
that as well. I just
consciously
know what it was.
Right. So it doesn't necessarily mean she's, getting karmic debt or repaid or something like that. I mean, it's just like if you have a child who comes in deformed or handicapped or something, a lot of times, or a mute or deaf, they've chosen that for a specific reason. They want to experience that for whatever reason. There's a story, I believe, in Robert Schwartz's book, or one of these books of the many ones that I've heard and read about life in between lives, where someone planned to not be able to hear because in a previous life they had heard their mother, I think, get abused or shot or something like that, and they wanted to come into the next life and not be able to hear, right? And that was going to be their way of trying to heal that trauma that they had on a soul level. And I think that might have been one of Michael Newton's books or something, so now that I think about it.
So this impending fear, just of not being protected, of being punished, of going.
Say it again. I'm having a hard time hearing you. So what'd you say?
Sorry, I'm like far. So just reiterating, it was a fear of the unknown, a fear of going insane, and following in the footsteps of, my mother, of just constantly being punished, as if there's some entity waiting to punish me or consume me or use me, like that. That's a belief that I know I have that I don't know how to pull out. I don't know what to do with that. I sit here with all these things that have happened to me, and I'm like, okay, it makes sense spiritually why it happens, and you can understand something logically and not fully process it emotionally. So I'm thinking maybe there's something on the emotional side, because when I did start smoking, I did it in order to forget the amount of pain that was just going through me. Because when I had postpartum depression, I didn't start until after I stopped breastfeeding. Um, one, I'm a good mom. But two, I waited as long as I possibly could. And when I could no longer produce milk because I was so stressed all the time, I was like, okay, I can't do this. So I ended up taking that up, and it ended up doing a good job of easing the pain. But in order to ease the pain, you had to forget. And so now that I've forgotten things, I'm like, well, I can't heal if I've forgotten. Like, that just means I can't access. That just means I locked something. So now I have to open it, look at it, sort through it, and hopefully heal so that I can, become better and align myself better with, what it is that I'm supposed to do in this life, because
Right.
I am afloat in the sea.
Right. And you said you do meditate, right?
I do. It's hard for me to find time in order to meditate because I do have my son. Um, but it's I can typically do like a grounding meditation, but again, it almost feels like something is waiting for me to close my eyes to attack me.
Mm.
I am able to do it once I get in there. I create an environment that's not stressful. I'm able to go in there. I'm able to do it. I've done long meditations. I did do some of the meditations you sent. I did them sporadically because, again, child. But I did do them. I was able to, go in there, and I did have visions for one of them, which was very interesting. Um,
So the reason I ask is because where was I going with this? Because so it's just like an onion and you have layers, right? So you've got layers, layers and layers of trauma, right? So here's two things that are coming to mind. One thing is if you can try to find some place. I know you're in a city, but maybe try to find some place where there's a tree and maybe you even bring your son and he, runs around or plays or crawls around or whatever. And try to lean up against a tree and put your hands on the roots of the tree and just consciously and spend time in the sun too also so you can do kind of the same thing but and just focus on letting the tree help absorb some of these layers of trauma that are around you, right? Because the tree will do that, right?
yeah.
And the sun can do that too. So spending time in the sun also with just consciously just be like, just melting away layers of trauma, right? But also when you meditate, just keep in mind that there's these layers and you don't have to delve into all of it at one time. I mean, it's nice to think about, oh, I just want to be done and I just want to be healed, from all this stuff, right? But just ask your higher self to pick one thing at a time, even if you only have 10 or 15 minutes to sit down and meditate. This is how I sit down and meditate. And I'm like, show me something that's unhealed in me. And that's what I say. Show me something that's unhealed in me. And I always get shown something, right? I mean, things that I didn't even remember. Or, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that time that my sister tried to kill herself. And I was devastated, hiding in the shed, crying and praying to God, please don't let her die, that type of thing, right? So, and just you're re-experiencing it, right? And then you're just bring Jesus in, bring angels in, whatever it is. Have you be you now, right? The you that knows a lot of things differently, come in and hold her. So a lot of times I'll have the me now go in and hold her, and then I'll ask Jesus to come and hold both of us. And then I'll cry it out and I'll be like, hey, why don't you come and spend the day with me? Right. And I'll tell my younger self, the one that got fragmented off my soul. So, like, if this is my soul, there's all these different traumas that happen, and these little pieces of your soul fragment off, and they're just like frozen in that moment of time. That's why we can be like, oh, I can see the scene so vividly. It's right in front of me. Right. Because there's like these little fragments that break off and they're frozen. And in order to unfreeze them, we go back and visit them where they're at, right? Because that's where they are. We go back to where they are. And then we relate with that again, right? We go back into that situation, but then we bring the healing light and healing love into that situation. And that can be, like I said, with healing light or healing love or Jesus or our current self or all of that combined, right? And then we sit with that and we process the pain and just, because maybe we couldn't process it then very well. We just kind of shoved it in a box, right? So we process that pain. And then, like I said, I'll invite her because she's not back here yet, back in my soul. She's still out here, but she's feeling the love, feeling the light. And I'll be like, why don't you come and spend the day with me? Let's hang out. Let's spend the day together. I'm going to be the mom you didn't have. I'm going to be the one that loves you that you didn't have. I'm going to be the family that you didn't have. Right. So you have all these things that, and then eventually it'll be like, oh, I forgot we were hanging together because where did she go? Well, she's reintegrated back into me, right? She's reintegrated back into you. So you just take little pieces at a time, and you'll notice those little pieces are going to pile up, and you're going to be like, wow, I've received so much healing just by doing the 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, doing these things, and reintegrating these little soul fragments back into you. So that's a really good thing that you can do, to try to help heal from a lot of this.
I did
So
find a
there
really good
are,
meditation. Oh, I'm sorry.
say it again.
I did find a
No, go
really
ahead.
good meditation. Found a good one that I could, send you that I was able to do that with, and it guided you through the entire process. Because I
Yeah.
randomly had this, like memory return out of nowhere because I could not remember before the age of 7. Like I remember going to Disney World at 6, but so I guess before like 6, like I had no memory. And this
Okay,
random
so you
thing
were
came
wondering about the walk-in thing because, okay, you said you didn't have any memories when you were younger either. So we can definitely ask that.
up.
Okay.
But there was this memory of where I ended up coming home like on the school bus, and I didn't have the keys or anything. Typically, my grandmother was there, and I knocked on the door. Nobody answered. I sat on the porch swing, and I waited for hours and hours and hours. The sun had gone down like 2 hours prior, and so I'd been sitting there waiting for at least like 6 hours, alone. I was this tiny little girl, and I was literally thinking I was forgotten. Like like something bad must have happened. And my dad walks up. Eventually, he unlocks the door, and I'm like, "Papi." And he and he like like he like jolts around. He's like, "What are you doing outside?" And I'm like, "No one unlocked the door for me." And I was just there for hours by myself, this tiny little baby. And so I went back into that moment, and I sat with that little girl on the swing, and I told her what happened, and I told her that I would wait for her, until her dad comes home. And so we just talked. I gave her a hug, and I ended up taking her into me, and we became one again. And so now I
Yeah.
have that memory, and
Yeah.
it hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exactly how it works. And not only that, but because there's no such thing as time, I do this a lot in a lot of my sessions. We'll actually go back to those instances when you're experiencing whatever, and we can send different energies and light and love and protection and feelings of safety and things like that into those situations, so that when you're actually when you actually like go through them, when you were back then, it could have been much worse for you. But because your future self went and sent that love and that energy into that situation, it didn't impact you like it could have, right? And I know that might be like a far fetch for people to grasp or understand.
No, like I understand. I wouldn't be able to re-explain it, but I understand what you're saying. I
Yeah.
couldn't reword
So
it to you.
that's probably why that little girl was okay sitting on the porch for 6 hours by herself, because her future self had gone back and sent someone to keep her company, right? Because you went back and you kept her company and you were there for her and you were safe and security for her. And so, yeah, while she was impacted, it probably could have been, or likely could have been, much more detrimental to her then,
Right.
right? Than it had been, because like I said, again, there's no such thing as time. And I'm not making this up, this aspect of it, but I'm just talking mostly like for anybody who's watching this, because this is done a lot in these hypnosis sessions, and this is these people's higher selves who are doing this type of healing on them. And not all of my sessions go on YouTube, obviously. I'm doing sessions almost every day, and I don't put them all on YouTube. It's just people like you who are just like, yes, go ahead and put on YouTube. And it's like, and that's awesome, because then we get to help other people. But and plus for the last few years I never even thought to ask anyone to put it on YouTube. So the thought didn't even cross my mind. So they're not out there.
If I can
Um
help somebody.
what?
I said, well, if I can help someone, I've got their
Right.
back.
Right. Yes. And that's the only reason I do this. Otherwise I'd be doing something completely like totally for myself, right? Um so I'm looking at your questions. So just give me a few minutes. I mean a minute here. Because this is going to be way too many questions to ask in one session.
That's totally fine.
Um,
I'm sure some of them are repetitive as well.
well, they're really not a lot of them, but I mean, I'm not saying you have to, and I'd never chase anyone to do multiple sessions, but if you wanted to, or you found another way to do the healing, which is totally fine, of course, but you're always welcome to come back for a second session to do any of this because I'm looking at it. I'm trying to focus on like the most critical, let's stop the bleeding questions, right? So I've said this before in sessions. First session is triage, right? We need to stop the bleeding before we can focus on the cuts and the scrapes and the bruises, right? Let's stop the bleeding so you don't lose that limb type of thing.
Yeah.
Not that you're going to lose any limbs, but
I thought it was because I did see your TikTok and I did see your video about the hypothyroidism. I'm a topic fascinating. So I did put my hypothyroidism on there
yeah.
because around I was diagnosed at the age of 11. I was given this tiny little pill. I remember my mom's like sobbing. She was like, "You're too young," and I was like, "Mom, calm down. I'm not like dead. Relax." Um, and I just didn't like fully understand what it meant and all the side effects that would come along with it. So it'd be really fascinating to see like what moment was it because I was 11. There's no way I would have just gotten that. You
What do
know,
you mean? What moment was it that you got hypothyroidism?
no, like because I understand that there are sometimes spiritual reasons as to why you get certain ailments. And so I wanted to know if my higher self had anything to say about that and if she could remove it because I'm like, listen, I might have, had my voice removed and been unable to speak up for myself then. But listen, ma'am, I definitely do it now. Okay. Like we have come in, we don't need that anymore. Thank you. We did good. We're good now. Thanks.
Okay, hold on. I'm still going through your questions here. Give me a second.
Sorry. I feel like I've overwhelmed you.
Yeah, hold on. Are you in college now or
I am. I did
graphic
return
design?
to college.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, okay.
Did I write down for graphic design?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, for a second I was like, psychic?
Yeah. Yeah, you wrote down graphic design. I'm taking some questions out and putting them into a session called later, just because I know there's not going to be time and I want to prioritize.
That's fine. It's totally fine. I'm sure my higher self could elaborate. A lot of those questions were, oh, if she only gave me like a yes or no, ask it this way. So hopefully I will elaborate. Feels like I'm going on a first date.
Sorry for the long pause again. There's just so many that we're not going to be able to get to because it's just a lot. It's a loaded session. So I want to just organize a little bit.
I'm so sorry. When did you say
No,
you had to?
no, it's nothing to apologize for, girl. Come on. Um, I just want to prioritize, that's all, to make sure that I'm not getting distracted by questions that we won't have time to get into.
I did really have one of the really big things that I want to understand um, is what direction I should take my career in. Because as I said in there, I really wanted to explore spirituality in um,
Yeah, I'm looking at that question now to make a career with spiritual and witchcraft community. So I got that one. Um,
and I didn't know if that was a really good way to go. I'm also really into creating or creative writing. There are novels that I've already begun. I don't know if it's better in one format, like a TV script rather than a book. I don't know if it's possible for me, or if it's if it's a possibility for me. Because if so, then that would be awesome. Uh,
is that something you're looking to start immediately or no?
I can't start immediately. What I wanted is something that I can do that will bring me like immediate or very quick financial success slash stability, because I do want to add a second income to my home. So
Why don't we just ask about what could she do to bring in more finances or add more income to them, right? And then we'll just leave it really open-ended. Instead of, I like the open-ended questions better than specific. You know what I mean? Um,
I just really
and
wanted
I'm trying to cut down on the questions just because I won't, there's too many. Like I can't keep you under for 4 hours. So let me go back to the career thing. Hold on. What does your fiance do right now for work?
he is a software developer.
Got it. And it's just the three of you living there, or do you have roommates, did you say?
No, it's just the three of us, my fiance, myself.
Just the three of you. Okay. Okay. And you said you're feeling a disconnect from your fiance. Can you explain the reasoning behind this and how is she supposed to improve this relationship? Okay, I think I might have it to where it's workable, but there's like a whole other page that will have to be for later. So I think I've got it down to about a page and a half. And I think I told you this before when we were doing our initial consultation call, is that every one question, because now I know your story, right? So I'll be able to ask follow-up questions. And then as questions come into my mind and just drop, just based on the whole storyline, new questions that aren't even on this list will emerge. But, you know, I do try to hit every question that I have on the narrowed down list that I have now, because I know so many more questions are going to come up. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at only one other life that you've ever lived, because if we look at two, you're not going to have as much time for questions. And I think the questions are way more important than looking at two past lives, right? Because the one you're focused on now and living now is this one. This part of your soul, anyway, is living this one. And so that's the one that we are focused on, just that little tiny speck in the whole multiverse of multiverses, right? Okay, so I have your questions down. I'm going to give you a little bit of coaching, but I'm going to turn the video off first before we do that, because I've got it in other ones and this has been long enough, over 3 hours, so I don't need anyone else listening to this. So stop apologizing, would you? So I'm going to turn it off. We're going to do just.
I'm sorry. Oh
no. Yeah. So I'm going to turn it off, and then everyone else can catch us on the second part, which is going to be her actual hypnosis session. And I will put you under first before I hit the record button. And if anyone's worried or wondering, oh my gosh, what if something happens between the internet connection between the two of you and she's going to go off and she's going to be forever stuck in hypnosis? I've never read a newspaper headline or heard a news show about someone being 40 years under hypnosis and dying still in hypnosis. So it doesn't happen. Hypnosis and meditation are virtually the same thing. The only difference is that I'm here asking you questions and you're speaking out loud, versus in meditations, you're hearing all these messages and seeing all these things in your own head, and there's no one there to talk to because you're meditating on your own, and no one there to be typing all the answers while you're talking. So, but hypnosis and meditation are the same thing. You will not stay in hypnosis. I will also give you a prompt that if anything happens between the connection of our computers, you'll be able to stay in a completely relaxed state while you reestablish the connection. And if for any reason you cannot reestablish the connection, your higher self will wake you at the most appropriate time yet today, which would probably be immediately. Because as I'm trying to pull people out of hypnosis, they're just like determining on their own, I'm done. And then all of a sudden I look over and I'm trying to pull them out slowly, and they're sitting up staring at the computer screen already. So you're not so far under, you can't function. So I'm going to turn it off. Everyone join us back for the actual hypnosis session.